the joint meeting of Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to order at 8 o'clock.
Really gonna be here?
I think so. Jack, do you want to call your meeting to order?
Call the FinCom meeting to order. We do have a quorum. Hey.
Just one announcement. I just wanted everybody to realize we only have a few microphones, and this is being taped and recorded, so if we could please speak up at the table so that Jamie can catch all of this. Well, good morning, and thank you to all the department heads and staff that are here today on a Saturday to present. First up, I guess we'll start with Chris.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just what I thought we would do this morning, we do have a little bit of a different setup where we have groupings so we can get through, hopefully a lot more people in a timely fashion. We do have, you all have your books that we provided, or the spreadsheet material of all the line items. I have the page numbers, actually, okay, excellent. Carol will pass out the page numbers. So this is where the page numbers are. I thought the other thing that I would do, I left at your places too, is the warrant articles. So if there are, like in the instance that you'll have people present this morning, that they have their operating budget and there are some elements that they have in their warrant articles. So if you want to try to do the capital, we could try to do the capital at the same time. And that way you can dispose of each, department that came in an orderly fashion. And just for the first come, first serve, which was really what it was laid out as, the police department was here first, DPW was here second, and fire was here third, just as a suggestion for folks that showed up in that order.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Spreadsheet of the budget, not in the
So
packet today.
Julie's not here?
She's coming. I think she said she was coming.
Until that dries.
Pre-answered questions.
Yes.
So budget questions that were asked, do we have that? The answers to those? Did those get?
I can make another copy for everyone.
No, that's
Just the
okay.
agendas
Were they
Yeah.
emailed?
We have them.
I can't find that email.
We can make another, that's the question.
The Emperor didn't have any prepared.
Good morning, Chief.
Morning.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You're up.
I'm up. I'm flying without a wingman this morning.
Oh. Tom.
He's finishing up a Caribbean cruise.
Oh.
So, with that in mind, I figured if there were any shortfalls or anything, we just pull it right out of Tom's salary, not a problem at all.
That's on the record, right?
I'm sure he'll review this too. No, just to get started, obviously, just kidding, Tom has done a fantastic job again on this budget. I can't speak highly enough of his knowledge of this budget. I'm sure you're all very familiar with it. I'm still a newbie to this process, but when you have somebody like Tom Gagnon and Kay Varley working for you, it makes it very, very easy. So, with that being said, I really can't thank them enough for the work that they put in on this. And I think, you'll recognize that my instructions to them when we had early on meetings is basically I wanted a budget that was, no frills, what we needed, and increases only in areas that were absolutely necessary. And I think that's exactly what they came up with. I also like to thank the lieutenants who assisted with getting them involved in the process, so they can get their feet wet in this. And I'd also like to thank, obviously, all of you, both boards, for giving up your Saturday. I'm only going to be here. How much time do we have, Chris? A couple hours? I'm only going to be here, hopefully, about 20, 25 minutes, right? But I know you folks are in for the long-haul marathon, so I do appreciate the leadership and the oversight that the board provides. And obviously, Chris and Shelley and Bob, and a special thank you to Carol, because one of the things you're going to see this morning is we actually, during FY18, spoke with Carol, and we looked at we had originally two budgets running, the communications budget, if you remember, and then the police budget. And I questioned that a few times with Tom, and so as well, it kind of dates back to when it was under the control of the fire department. So what we looked at is, hey, why don't we, you know, in the sense of trying to streamline and just keep everything straightforward for us to track and make it easier for Kate doing payroll, why don't we just merge the two budgets? And that's exactly what we did in FY18. So that's gonna come along with some confusion on my part, not anybody else, hopefully, but there may be some confusion, but basically what resulted in that, in this budget as we go through it, is there are some line items that may appear to be inflated when in actuality that's a result of the merge. And I'll certainly try and point that out as we go along. And if there are any particular questions related to that that I can't answer, obviously I will get the answer for you. Okay? So just, you know, as a snapshot, this isn't, you know, the overall budget is up just over 0.75%. The overall budget, which is salaries, expenses, and I guess what we refer to as capital outlay, but it's actually cruiser replacement, is that? I mean, maybe someday we should change that, because it's not really capital. So 0.75%, which I think is very reasonable, and, you know, the salary and wages breakout of that is a little over 2, but that reflects a realistic increases related to contractual steps, the 2% increase, and how that kind of compounds things, the 2% increase, because there's formulas that use base pay, and then whatever, you've got a base pay formula, it's gonna increase your amount coming out the other side, because that base pay was increased by 2%. So it's kind of a trickle-down effect. So that's the big difference this year, is the merging of the budgets. Also, this year, as you're aware, there's a request for an extra position. That was not done last year. However, I don't want to take up a lot of time plugging for it. I just will say that this has been a very challenging year in FY18. The beginning of FY18, we lost an officer due to a resignation. He ended up going out to Chicago to be closer to his girlfriend out there, which, you know, was fine. But that's a full-time position, resigned and left. Then we had 2 officers go out injured, one requiring surgery. We just got one back. That was back in May and August. So at one point in time, we were down 5 officers. And 4 of those, what I refer to as impacted the line, which means our daily patrol numbers get impacted by somebody being out injured or sick. So it was kind of a lesson to me that I think we need a little more depth on the bench. Staffing for policing is very challenging, it's very unpredictable, based on your injuries, and, you know, also whatever else may happen. You know, sometimes admin leaves happen, sometimes, you know, long-term illnesses happen. So I think that this was a lesson to me that, you know, we're just hanging on as far as how that has impacted our overtime budget this year. And we're hoping, we did a couple things to try and mitigate those hits early on in the year, which is, as soon as we could, we dropped to a lower minimum of officers, which never makes me comfortable, but sometimes is a reality, and I can touch on that a little bit more later. But and we also reassigned a plainclothes position to the road. So it's not as if we just kind of, you know, kept everything the same and tried to roll with the punches. We did make adjustments on our end, and as you know, we didn't come looking for money yet. We did, you know, in FY17, spend over our overtime, but we were able to offset it with salary and other things, so we didn't have to look for anything. So I just think that, you know, in support of the position, we all kind of need to realize that it's a safety issue when we talk about staffing in the line. And I always constantly try to remind myself that, you know, while I'm home warm in bed, there are people out there who are working for me in this community, all of us actually, that stand ready to respond to, you know, the call and put themselves, you know, their personal safety at risk very often. So that's something I try to remind myself, and I think we owe it to them the men and women that are out there doing this, putting their personal safety at risk and time away from their families. And I think last weekend was a real good example of that. You know, it was really howling out there and it was dangerous. And, you know, we had officers out there throughout the storm and they were extremely busy. So, you know, for that reason, I would say the extra position would go a long way to help us, one, respond to unpredictable events, and two, you know, just looking down the road, my ultimate goal, I don't know if I'll ever achieve it, but my ultimate goal would be not to have to drop to minimums. I think this town, what's appropriate for this town is 3 patrols and a supervisor. And we will drop in the off-season to 2 patrols and a supervisor, but, you know, our call volume pretty much stays the same across the board. And serious calls are, you know, and police work's getting more and more dangerous. In the last 6 to 8 months, we've had two confirmed shootings, both that resulted in arrests, and one, a recovery of a loaded firearm. So it's touching every town, and I just, you know, I think we have an obligation to make sure our people stay safe. That's enough said about that. But we have an obligation. And just in closing, you know, I also realize that the town budget is not a bottomless pit for the police department, and we obviously try and be a team player. And I think that's reflected in the cuts, you know, that Chris and Carol recommended and have completed in the budget. We self-reduced our overtime by about $18,000. We contributed $20,000 to the new IT position. Unfortunately, as you remember, I tried to plug that for our department, and it was kind of changed gears, and we're going to do a town-wide now, and I certainly hope the police department can realize a good piece of that, because IT is a difficult topic for us. And we pay an outside contractor still, so. So pretty much we're looking at, you know, a budget that we've already reduced, either ourselves or after first, second tier cuts, about $47,000. And that's my lead-in. So my plan is to just kind of go through very quickly go through the, I guess, what are they called? I call them line item numbers, but object numbers maybe within the munis printouts that you have. And just for the sake of time, I'd just kind of like to, I'll touch on the increases that are noted there in percentages and as to why. And then I'll do the very best I can to answer any questions you might have. Does that sound like a plan? All right, so in the printout I have, our organization number, if that's what that org stands for, is 012101. So that's the police department, and there's only one now, so because of the merge. So we start with the part-time year-round salaries and wages. Obviously, that's a reduction, and that's where the $20,000 came out of for the IT position. Next is 511900, which is showing a 2.95% increase. That's our big salaries and wages section of our budget. And again, this reflects that increase as a result of contractual 2% increase and the trickle-down effect that has. Next one, it shows a slight increase is overtime, 513000. As I alluded to, we did reduce this in the process by 18,000, then there was another 5,000 taken out, and then most recently 4,600. So I don't think the 46 is reflected in this number though, Carol, right? But that came out a little later. Again, the overtime is affected by the 2%. We did, you know, each officer's overtime isn't the same. So we have to kind of pick a middle number and go with that. And I think Kate picked $54 an hour as a result of the increases across the board. So that's, and as you look down the column there of overtime, we are committed to a lot of community events that cost overtime. Cranberry Fest, you know, Music in the Port, Mariners games. If push came to shove, it would be my recommendation, if we ended up getting in serious overtime trouble, that those obligations be pushed off to the organizations that we're actually there for. But we're not there yet, so that's overtime. Longevity shows an increase, that's 514,000. That's, that 11%'s about $8,000 again. 2%, that's impacted by the 2% increase. That's impacted by additional officers being added to the rolls of that longevity. That's impacted by officers gaining another year of longevity, and that all causes an increase. Holiday pay, 515,002. Hate to admit it, but I have to own that one. That's the biggest increase there as a result of my contractual agreement that was done following a salary assessment, and the board signed my contract, which included holiday pay, and that's what that gigantic, well, I wouldn't call it gigantic. That's what that increase is there in holiday pay, 515,002. That brings us down. All the rest, as we run down here, show decreases, however slight. Next increase is 521100, which is electric utility. That was, that's your 5% increase over FY17 actual spending. Gas utility was a nice surprise. We actually, even with the 5%, was a reduction, spent less. Water shows an increase because that was, that's based on actual spending, and that $37.91 is actually $745 increase. That's what that actual number is. Under water utility, 523,000, and that's based on actual spending. So we're just trying to properly budget for that. And this one here, decrease. Continue down, all decreases. Next one is 530,900, other professional services, tech service. This one is one of the items that was a result that impacted by the merge of the communications and the police budget. That's a $14,973 increase is what that 45% represents. Big ticket item in this area was the Cape Cod Networks, which is our tech support. They did actually reduce that a little bit from what Tom tells me, but that came in from dispatch, which is going to show an increase. We also have a $4,500 maintenance agreement for our new building security system, which is, if you recall, we put on, I think, an article last year. And however, there is, the first year for maintenance is covered under that, but it's going to end up ending in the middle of FY19. So that's why Tom threw in the $4,500 for the Galaxy Security System maintenance agreement. And all of this, as we go along, trickled into this is the new position. So you will see that EOS down the bottom of 530,900. Oh, I'm sorry, that was taken out and put somewhere else. We had it, but when you see EOS, that's an enhancement of services. That's the extra position, and that's represented throughout salary, throughout expenses, you know, areas of clothing, things of that nature. 534,400, telephone, teledata, slight increase, actual spending. 538,000, other purchase services, that's a 1.37, that's about $1,000 increase in this one. That does include, you know, an EOS, you know, some of the bigger items in there. Enhancement of services, basic recruit academy, 3,500. There's an assessment center budgeted there because we're going to be losing Deputy Chief Gagnon. He's going to be retiring in FY19, and the replacement process. I had conversation with Chris. I support the assessment center process, so that's what that's in there for. 542,000. This is another one that was impacted by the merge. That's 62.99%. Just double checking, does everybody get the same numbers I'm working off of here on this printout?
We've been looking for it in our emails because we don't have the printout. So
Oh, okay.
I think we're a little bit.
All right, well, that could be to my advantage,
We
right?
have them, we're fine.
All right.
I'm gonna say, we sent them to everybody.
On our vaunted email
Yeah,
system.
exactly.
We'll sell them to those guys.
All right.
Mine has a 63% increase.
Okay, I've got six.
Changes
You
everything.
got me. 62.99 is what I'm showing there, and that's 8,000 or 700, 7,500 of that came in from dispatch. That was their office supplies line that is just pulled in there. As we continue down, all decreases.
It only goes up to 146.
Decreases. All right, and so the only other thing then would be the cruiser replacement, which we level funded. We think we're doing the same thing as last year, requesting 2 interceptors, marked units, and 1 expedition unmarked. We think we can do it for the same price we did last year, so that was level funded. Sometimes when you deal with unmarked vehicles, you don't have to deal with paint, you don't have to deal with switchover of gear, because it's an unmarked vehicle that doesn't need the prisoner seats and screens and everything else, so you save some there. And did you want me to touch on what we have, the one item in capital, I think the 36,000?
36,000, correct.
Is for tasers. It's a 5-year plan that Deputy Chief Gagnon researched thoroughly, and Lieutenant Sullivan also, a lot of good work on it. Our tasers, basically, the taser is an electronic control weapon. It's a safety device used by the officers to try and keep their distance when somebody's violent, and it will basically immobilize them and allow you to get them handcuffed and under control. So, very quickly, 5-year plan, it's basically a payment plan. It's not really a lease, it's a payment plan over 5 years, and we put the first one out in capital request for about $36,000, and the following 2 years, about $14,000. And then we'll have 2 years, the remaining 2 years, no cost, but full coverage, full replacement, full warranty, all the cartridges, everything. So I think it's a good plan. There's a number of communities that are on it already, and our tasers are not being supported. They're outdated. So that's what I have.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
Thank
just
you, Chief.
one notation on that. I just want to make sure that this budget does have 4 positions in it that are seemingly new. We did have, administration made a mistake last year, so I made a mistake last year in which we had 3 positions, 2 in the fire and 1 in police, that we had put it in, and then we thought we took them out, we did not. So the money is in the budget already for this position that the chief has alluded to, from the FY18. And just for full, transparency, we did not fill that position because we had not told town meeting about it. So once town meeting acts on it, then we will proceed to fill it if it is kept in the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. I'm gonna get on to questions from the board. I'm gonna start with you, Larry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, I'm interested, you can hardly drive around town now with all the detail work going out. How does that affect you? Does that affect your budget at all, or how's that?
Well, Carol can tell you, the auditors didn't like it, our detail account, right? And we weren't completely aware that had gone into deficit, and I know Kate's done a fantastic job calling companies and trying to work through that. That's the only way it's impacted. It's paid for, it's not town money, it's private contractors.
Yeah, I think the issue on that is when we bill contractors, sometimes small contractors won't necessarily pay us. We have a little bit of a fee that we can add on top, 2.5%. So we generally collect, but it's not unusual that over a course of time that some people won't pay, but yet we have a legal obligation to pay the officers that do the details within 7 days. So we have to pay, and we don't always get to collect everything. So that $75,000 is probably built up over 10 years or plus. So I don't want people to think that it's, been something that's happened just recently. We've just identified it as a problem, and we do have an article to address that.
I noticed on one of your numbers in infamous failed override some years ago. We had 47 people in your department. And this one, if I read it right, 33? 37.
Yeah, those numbers can be misleading because I think the one that the town uses includes everybody, which includes dispatchers.
Dispatch, too,
Yeah, 37 police officers, I believe, was what they had prior to that 2005 hit. And then now we're back with the extra position I got when I first came in for the opioid issue. We're to 34 police officers, 5 dispatchers, 2 civilians.
Let me ask your judgment on overtime. Coming from the private side, I was always nervous about when overtime got to be a certain point, you know, we said it's not right, you have to hire someone.
Right.
What's your judgment on, what's the percent of overtime that, in your judgment, works and we're, you know, it's not the right move either ethically, how we treat our people, or safety, you know, they get worn, they're tired.
Yeah, I prefer to focus on the safety side because in 30 years of police work, I'm not sure I've ever gotten a solid answer on where the breaking point is for when you should actually hire somebody. I mean, obviously, if it's ridiculous, if overtime is ridiculous, then yeah, I think there's some savings to be had there. You know, one of the interesting things that came to me about the whole overtime and full-time issue is, especially as a police department, it takes us a year to get somebody operational. So if we're pulling money out of our overtime account the same year we're hiring somebody, we're not gonna see any savings in overtime until the following year, unless they're already academy trained. You know, so that's just one piece of the complicated octopus that overtime is when you're trying to look at.
How about on the safety issue then?
Huh? I think that,
On the safety issue then, 'cause that,
yeah, well, the safety issue, you know, I think that we need to staff appropriately. You know what I mean? So, like I said, my wish is for this, my feeling is for this town, I think it's 3 officers and a patrol supervisor. And if you need to, you know, hit overtime to accomplish that, then that's what you do. But I think that if you add an officer, you will hopefully impact, you will realize the savings in overtime. It's just, it's unpredictable because of the way that, you know, you plug an officer in, a full-time officer on a shift, he's on that shift, but your overtime hits all 3 shifts. So where you would plug them in most likely is an area where you're the shortest, you know, where you've got the biggest hole in your schedule, but you're still gonna be getting hit with overtime in your other 2 shifts. So I've spent a lot of hours trying to, you know, look at that problem and say, okay, for a department this size, what's what's the perfect number? But the problem is, you're never at the perfect number. I've been at this 30 years, and for the department I came from, and now this too, I think we've enjoyed maybe 1 year of full staffing. You know what I mean? So the overtime has to exist. It's a necessary evil. There's just no way around it because of the unpredictability of human beings. They get sick, they get injured, they leave, and then we're left.
Yeah, and one of the problems with when you hire a new officer, that position creates a need for more
Exactly,
overtime
right.
for his vacation and replacement and sick leave.
well,
Sick
maybe, but I mean, safety issue, you could also just have people that move from place to place too, I suppose. But then you're carrying maybe excess people is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's a, question comes up always, and we're being pushed, on the police cars you ordered. What's your comment when people ask, why don't you buy hybrids or something more cost efficient? If that doesn't work for your.
You know what, you mean cost efficient fuel-wise?
Yeah,
Yeah, you know, I freely admit, I haven't looked at fuel expenses there. There could be a potential for savings there, and as long as they perform as well. I think hybrids are probably a little more expensive, though, down the line. And, but if they come in a police package and they're reliable and they would save fuel, I'd certainly be willing to look at that.
thank you.
Julie?
Oh, I mean, thank you for your presentation. Obviously, it's very thorough. My only comment really is back to IT and some money, some savings we'd recognize by being able to assist the department with that. And I would agree, you know, if there's any savings that we could have by looking at vehicles, although I know that they're more costly initially. Over the long term, it might save us some money, but those would be my only
Yeah, one thing on
comments.
that, just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I had a meeting with the people on green communities, and I didn't realize that there's a idling system that you could put into some of these vehicles, that when the vehicle idles, it goes down and doesn't idle as much, it doesn't use as much fuel. I wasn't aware of that, perfectly honest, until yesterday. So we will start to research some of these things, and if there are other options that are available, a lot of the cruiser time is idle time, which is they're sitting there idling the car, waiting for a call. And if we could save some money on gas and have that, and we do retrofit them, that's something that's worthwhile to look at. So we will explore those options.
Yeah, no, I think, and, you know, obviously, the manpower is an issue, and I understand, you know, you've got to have that coverage, so that also probably will help with overtime costs, so slightly.
Right.
That's it, thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of things. I guess the question is, you haven't really looked into it, but do they have a police package hybrid, though? In an SUV or crossover?
Not right
Don't ask me, I don't know, I just raised it.
Yeah, I'm not, yeah, he just raised it. We'll look at it as part of the
Yeah, but a
green
police
community
package isn't
effort.
just that goes vroom. I mean, a police package has to do with bigger alternators, bigger brakes,
Right.
heavier duty suspension. I mean,
Right.
police package cars are made to be either police cars or taxis.
I saw one in Detroit a couple of years ago, but it was a prototype.
Okay, well, that was my question. I mean, we
That's
felt,
something we can look at with the chief and explore that options.
and in terms of the overtime, just to refresh my memory, I mean, if somebody does get injured on the job, and it's kind of workers' comp kind of injury, what kind of time are you looking at where that person's not staffed?
What do you,
You know,
time,
from the time that they'd actually get injured to the time that they'd be going.
depends on the injury. Yeah, I mean,
Let's say it's something that they have to retire eventually.
yeah, well, you know what? One of the things I think is beneficial to us is we have this gallery group that works for the town, and their job is to do just that, is to follow these injured employees and then make sure that, you know, appointments are being met and we're not dragging our feet, and their job is to get them back into, you know, back onto the job as soon as possible. And we have been cognizant of that, and Kate has been doing a great job. She's in constant communication with them as far as these injured officers. And I also have an option in my contract with the patrol officers that after, I think it's 90 days of injury, I can bring them back in for light duty. And even though that may not help us on the line, I think from my experience, what I've seen in the past in other departments is just getting them back into the building is important. You know what I mean? And to get the thought process of, okay, I need to be working my way back in here, because it's very easy when you're out injured. But the longer you're out, the harder it is to come back. And, you know, between the gallery group and that option in the contract, we're doing the best we can to get them back as quickly as we can. And by no means do I want to indicate that we have anybody that's doing anything other than that. But I think those are good pieces to have in place. And you know, but depending on the nature of the injury, like, you know, we've had one officer out since May. He's the one that just came back last May, was injured last May. We have another one who went out in August, early August. He's still out. They were both line officers. And then we have the opening, we have somebody in the academy right now, but that's a hole in the line. So,
The more succinct answer, that's what I was driving at, is
Yeah.
you have a risk containment
Oh,
system
yes,
and you
yeah,
are
yeah.
following this stuff. And
yep, we're on it. It's frustrating, I admit, but,
Because that's one of the drivers of the overtime.
yeah, it is.
Okay,
Is that done?
Yep.
Gino?
I just have two questions. The first is about the criminal activity reported.
Yep.
So protective custody you have as a new item on the top near drug overdose, but
Okay.
also in arrests/PCs. I'm just wondering if it's the same protective custody, or if the new item is a different category of protective custody.
Yeah, I think we break it out differently in our reason on the call call sheets in our computer system. There was a change in the law that allows you to put somebody who's overdosed on opioids in protective custody. I think that, right there, protective custody, represents both the opioid and alcohol.
So,
Alcohol's been on the books for a while, opioids only a year or so old.
so would that 44 be represented in the 216 on 2017 under arrests and PCs? It's 216.
Yeah, if he's got arrest PCs there, I assume that 44 would be a part of that. Because whenever you actually take somebody into custody, I think it's being calculated as an arrest or a arrest/PC. So that number would include the 44. That would be my...
And then the other question I had was about the new hire. It says new officer, step 1 with master's degree and training bonus.
Right.
Step 1 is $58,197.
Right.
Is this saying that the new officer it's necessary for him or her to have a master's degree? Or is it saying that is that like the title of the position?
No, what that is that's playing it safe budget-wise, is you have, because we don't know, see, we're in the process right now of hiring, of establishing a list, not hiring anybody yet, of establishing a list of recruits. That officer could come in with a master's degree, or they could come in with no education. But we have to assume in the budget that it's gonna be a master's
The
degree.
hires.
That's what, right.
Because I
Okay.
remember when we hired some people right out of the academy in recent years, it was in the 40s,
Right,
right?
right.
Without the master's degree?
yep,
Okay,
yeah.
so this number could potentially go down?
It could,
Okay, thanks.
exactly.
What's that?
Yep.
Jack, I'll turn it over to you for now.
Mark?
No questions.
Lori? Ed?
So just to comment on your overtime, you mentioned that you provide staffing for a number of community events. And just to note that we appreciate providing the officers, but the Cranberry Festival, we pay for them.
Right, okay.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yep.
That it?
That's it.
John?
Thank you, Chief. I got a couple of questions. The first one is just for my own information. Do you staff your police department for the summertime use or for the wintertime use, or is it one staffing level year-round?
Yeah, it's summertime, so in the summer, usually, in the late spring, we will do what we call increase to a 4-man minimum, 4-officer minimum. So that's a supervisor and 3 patrols. That's the minimum, that's the lowest we will go. And we'll run that summer through fall. Sometimes, if the call volume and seriousness of things going on, we'll run it right up to the holidays. But I think this past year, as a result of the shortages we had in manpower, we had to drop early. I don't have the exact date. I recall us doing it, Tom telling me that we were gonna have to do it based on what the budget looked like. But, yeah, so we have an off-season, I guess we could refer to an off-season like right now. Our minimums are an OIC, a sergeant or an OIC, and 2 patrol officers. And that doesn't make me comfortable in a town this size, really. If you have an officer out, and a supervisor, say, tied up in North Harwich on a domestic, and something happens down, by Red River Beach, or out on the Dennis line, like, they're on their own unless we can get another car there from an adjoining town, and you never know what they're into. So I just, my feeling on the matter is I would love to see, and I've talked to several patrol officers about this also. I'd love to see the supervisor in 3 all
But
the time.
we don't staff up for the summer with, pardon the
We don't
term,
have-
but rent a cop for the summer where you
no.
bring in people?
No.
Okay.
Industry standard these days is clearly getting away from that because of liability purposes.
Training, I imagine, yeah.
We have some special officers that have been with us for a long time that just help us in some of the special events, logistics and things like that. But, no road work.
And where do you stand right now with your staffing levels? Are you still
We're-
down, how many?
Yeah, we're currently down 4,
4 still.
yeah, and 3 of those impact the line.
And a couple of questions have already been answered, but and this is just a general question for all the departments. When I see office supplies, is there a common pool that all the departments go to purchase paper, for instance? I mean, you're not out with buying paper on your own. The fire department's buying it on their own. Is there a central
Yeah, you know what, that's an interesting question.
Actually, we kind of do it based upon the building. So people in town hall, we try to have people buy from the same. I think we do have contracts, state contracts, that we encourage people to utilize throughout the organization. But we do purchasing kind of more centralized on the building that people are in and not necessarily by individual department.
Is there thought, I don't know if it's appropriate time, to combine that, bulk, savings in bulk? And I've heard you can even jump into the Barnstable Commission and get on their contracts too.
So we actually did look at Barnstable County and the contract they have with some vendors for office supplies, like WB Mason and so forth. And we found that we are paying the exact same price that they are. So anybody that uses that contract in the town of Harwich gets exactly the same price.
So the chief is buying paper at the same price as the fire department, or, okay. And the same thing applies to bulk fuel also?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Dana?
Yeah, I guess all day we'll be talking a lot about overtime. It's not just in your department, but we have 27 line items with overtime in it, and it's up over $2 million. And we'll be looking, I know I'll be asking to just hold at some of the FY18 levels and manage it rather than in some cases, put on increases. But we'll be looking at that all day long and talking about it.
Yeah.
That's my only comment on police.
Couple questions. Are the two interceptors on the unmarked SUV, is that part of our longer-term replacement plan that fits within what we would have been expecting from our plan?
I
Or
think
is-
in terms of, a decision was made here a long time ago, I know I've made the same decision in other communities, that because vehicles, police vehicles in particular, get such heavy use, what you try to do is make sure you change those out on a regular basis. So 3 or 4 has been the number in which to keep the fleet operational.
So it's realistic to expect we'll see 3 or 4 next year and
Yes,
so
absolutely.
on?
yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, 3
And
is-
do you see that being consistent with what you're trying to accomplish?
Yep, absolutely. And that's not, of note, this is not increasing the fleet at all. This is replacing vehicles that have 100,000 miles on them. And when I'm not a mechanic, but when you get a cruiser with 100,000 miles on it, it's tired. And it's approaching, in my opinion, unsafe, but sure Ford would disagree.
The crew level, the staffing level, this has been a topic for a number of years here in Harwich, and goes back to even before the override that failed. Do you, I mean, obviously, you'd like to have another person or two, but over the next 5 years, do you see the need for added staffing going up, staying where it is, or not? What do you think's gonna happen? Because you've got opiates, that's new, you've got other drugs, I'm sure, that are on the increase, and so on.
Well, obviously, that's my vision. I'm being completely honest with you, that as a police chief in a community this size, based on our call volume and what I have seen over the last 3 years, is that I think a safe staffing level for this town and this police department is a sergeant running a shift with 3 patrol officers. That would be the minimum that I would like to see. Will we ever get there? I don't know, but that would be my ultimate goal. And I think that's reasonable. That's not over the top,
Okay.
staffing-wise, for a town this size. Because we do it for half the year right now, right? So that-
I do think, just to add comment, Jack, one of the things I've seen here, and probably over the last 10 years, is that you're starting to see that in police department and fire department, that the training requirements are becoming more and more. And the more you take people out of service to get the additional training, which is good, it makes sense to do, but it also puts a hardship on the organization in terms of overtime. When you have people out at training, you gotta backfill those. And I think what's gonna drive us having to get more people is, quite honestly, the more training and the more requirements, opioids add new elements to the duties. that's gonna drive where we're eventually gonna need additional people to kind of fulfill some of the obligations that get created through all this additional training. Not a bad thing, but certainly a trend that I've seen more prevalent in the last 10 years.
Going back to the Operations Review Task Force of a decade or so ago, overtime was a big issue. And, it's no surprise to me, it's still a big issue. But the reality is that as we've worked to get staffing back closer to where we wanted it, overtime hasn't gone down really. So I think we need to address a number of different issues to see if there's any way to have a reasonable level of overtime. My suggestion would be that be and a little bit of investigation around what we might do differently in various ways. Obviously, you're constrained by not having a total free hand to add people, the instant you want them, but maybe there's some other options that we might want to try. Suggestion. Thank you very much.
Chief, just one clarification. You said you brought somebody down and put them back on patrol from upstairs?
Yes.
So that doesn't impact the numbers at all? Are you replacing that person upstairs, or did you
No,
replace
no.
that?
That's just it, and there's no plan to do it real soon.
Okay.
That was to assist the line.
So you're comfortable with what you have upstairs now?
Yes.
Okay. And the line is more important?
Yeah, absolutely. Line, that's always been our mantra. They don't like to hear it all the time, but the line takes precedence. That's the big part of our job. We do have to have detective staffing, and again, I'm committed from the time I came in the door with what's going on with the opioid crisis. I'm committed to the task force position, and obviously very thankful that you supported the patrol investigative position on the street level to address the street level issues and OD follow-ups and things like that. So I think the model's working, but it does create a cost.
Is that position, that special position that you just mentioned, is that on the line, or is that completely separate? of the
He
line?
assists the line. It does not what we refer to as impact the staffing numbers. But there have been instances where he has been used. Unfortunately, he's one of the ones that's out injured right now. But they have been used to help in the event that something's going on. So he's available. It's just that doesn't count towards the minimums on the line.
Okay. And my last question, back to IT.
Yeah.
What do you have plugged in for an IT number? There's a lot of numbers here.
25,000, I think.
That's your
That
number
was-
for your IT?
Yeah, that's just our outside contractor, and I know that Scott has done some work, a lot of good work for us, and that there's a number that represents his help as also, Scott Tilsley.
What is that?
Those two combined, I would have to get back to you on that, Michael. I'm not sure where I know I saw it in here.
Chris, do you know Scott's number?
Oh, here it is, I got it. 11,200, ITOT.
Okay.
11,200 and 25,000 something for the Cape Networks.
Great.
Remember, we contributed 20,000 out of the, right, for the IT position. I think, as a matter of fact, I think it was the most of
And
any department, right,
Yeah,
Chris?
I think there's two things in terms of IT in general. I know that's probably going to be a theme today, that there are specialty elements that you'll hear in both police and fire that the IT person isn't going to be able to do. We're still going to have those resources outside. What we're talking about is we did ask, actually, we took one of the clerical position dollars and put it towards funding in IT to get additional IT support for those higher level elements that we are able to consolidate and do.
Thank you, Chris. Chief, go ahead.
I was reminded, deep down in this big pile of numbers, there was what I would call personal protection kind of stuff. Are we up to speed on where we want to be on all that, and the vests and on and on and on?
Yes, and I truly appreciate the support there. That's one of the things I meant to mention. You folks, both boards have been extremely supportive whenever it comes to a topic like that. Firearms, ammunition, training related to, and the vests. The most recent acquisition, I think we've only got a couple budgeted this year. We're outfitting every car with the rifle plates, rifle carriers that will stop a rifle round. a helmet, and eventually, hopefully, some kind of system to carry extra ammunition, and as well as potentially first aid supplies on your person. It's the sad reality of how we operate these days, but I think, you know, again, we owe it to them to give them the tools they need to
Thank you.
survive.
I'm sorry, may I ask one question? In speaking of the overtime and the rent-a-cop, not the use of the rent-a-cop, is that also increase our overtime? Did you have to staff up in the summer? Is that how you do that, or?
Well, they, you know, a while back, special officers were eliminated, so yeah, you either have to hire somebody or use overtime.
Okay,
You know, so again, and that goes to the minimums. So
Right.
the minimums through the summer is patrol, sergeant, or OIC, and 3 officers.
Any other questions from FinCom?
All right, thank you.
Oh, okay,
Got it.
thank you, Mike.
Larry?
Related to IT, a few years ago, we had the Open Cape come through and the
Yeah,
broadband.
yeah.
Do we pay extra for that, for Open Cape, or how's that? Do you know how that works?
Got me there, Larry.
That's been
It's just-
expensive, it hasn't really grown much.
Yeah, we just have, I think that they have an obligation to provide that and make it available to us. And then they are offering products that are comparable, like T1s and things of that nature, that are comparable to what Comcast offers. At least in general, in our discussions with them, they have been more expensive than the Comcast option. So we have not migrated over, but we do continue to look at their business model to see if it makes sense at some point.
That's a discouraging part, because now you and I have, it's been so expensive to have another, I know the wire department looked at it a while ago, and it didn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Don?
Somebody else use it, okay. Done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just sitting here thinking about this, and I even hate to bring it up, but I'm gonna. Well, actually, with all of the school intrusions, I'm just wondering, I'm not aware of anything particularly special that we've been doing in drills, particularly in the elementary school.
We've touched base with all the schools. I've had good conversations with both superintendents. Our SROs are on it. They just did a drill up at Lighthouse, I think, yesterday.
Yeah, but I'm thinking, is that gonna impact anything in the future? Because that's a task that you haven't really been involved with in terms of staging, you know, drills.
Specific to budget, chief.
Yeah.
No, I think, you know what, I don't see a huge impact related to that. We realize our responsibility in that area and take it very seriously. And there may be some money, as one of the control chiefs for the Cape SWAT, I've been involved in SERPED and asked to be I put that in one of my reports to you folks, an alternate member up there in SERPED, and that's Homeland Security money. And just recently obtained about $80,000 for the Cape SWAT group in training and equipment. And the word is that they also fund drills and exercises. So we would be looking to that. I already had a discussion with Lieutenant Considine and Lieutenant Sullivan about that very thing. And they are working on spinning up a drill. And I know there are other chiefs, Cape chiefs, fire chiefs and police chiefs that are interested in continuing to exercise those plans.
Again, you don't
Mass
have it in
casualty.
overtime, and you
Yeah,
don't think it's
yeah.
gonna be
So,
impacting.
I don't think it would be anything huge, and we would certainly try and pursue outside funding too for those exercises.
Okay.
But, you know, one way or another, we realize that it's necessary. So, but not a huge impact, is the way I see it.
All set? Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief.
Nice job.
Next up would be DPW. DPW's on, the detail is on 188, page 188.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Finance Committee. I have with me Link Cooper, DPW Director. I have with me Kim Berube, Senior Administrative Assistant. She made me promise not to say that she was the brains behind the operation, so I
know
won't,
that.
to state the obvious. And I have in the audience Sean Libby, Facilities Manager, also known as Mass Chief, in case you have any facilities maintenance-related questions. I'd like to start this morning by saying this past weekend, the past weekend storm, I thought the fire, police, and DPW had an excellent response. I don't say that lightly. I've worked for the town for quite a few years. I do not recall this amount of wind damage since Hurricane Bob in 1991. Obviously not as significant as Hurricane Bob, but we didn't gear up like we did for a hurricane, or we would have made a major snowstorm or something like that, because it wasn't forecast to be the event. The DPW on that Friday and Saturday, picking up immediate, opening up roads, immediate damage, did so on about half a crew. I did not assemble everything at all the various departments as a cohesive entity. We thought it really wasn't warranted. We spent $12,000 on overtime clearing the roads, which I thought was remarkable. I'd like to also thank Boo, our highway manager, who did an excellent job, and as well as Kevin Considine from the PD. Those two gentlemen made this seamless, the response to this seamless. It was quite remarkable what they did. I think all three departments did so on a very shoestring budget as far as overtime response. Obviously, we've been picking up this past week from the storm, and we will for the coming week from the storm. Probably about 2 weeks to get everything back to being normal. But I really want to thank the men and women of the DPW specifically for an excellent response.
Thank you.
I'd like to make your job easy here this morning. Do you have the materials I sent out?
We do.
Okay. In round numbers, the DPW budget request for this year was $5.2 million. Is $265,000 over FY18's budget, or 5.29%. If I take out two major items, one would be salary and wage increases of $71,879, which is all contractually driven, no increase in hours, no increase in staff, as well as the solid waste disposal costs, which is all C&D, or construction demolition material, of $185,000. If I take those two items out in the budget, I have an $8,439 increase, or a 0.17%. The budget overall is up 5.29%. You may recall the last 3 years, the DPW budget has been short, and we've had to supplement the budget for the last 3 years. It's all been, to me, underestimating construction and demolition entirely. For 2 years, we went to town meeting, and I believe last year was plugged in-house with some budget transfers. And those have all been around between $150,000 and $200,000. This $185,000 request of the C&D will hopefully plug that. I have not notified the town administrator that we are not going to make budget this year. It's going to be very close. I think we're going to hopefully be able to make it without the need of any transfers. That said, the money's going to a good place, which is to support our solid waste operation. We generated, I believe, $2.79 million last year, our FY17. Probably be in excess of $3 million this current year. Out of that $3 million, approximately $900,000 is sticker sales. Strike that, permit sales, since we did away with the stickers a couple of years ago. Residential permit sales. About $1.2 million is generated off of just construction and demolition. And it's just going gangbusters, and every single year, I think it can't increase anymore, and it does. Probably a victim of our own success, because the guys do an excellent job at moving that product. We do so pretty efficiently. The remaining $900,000 is for things, other items, commercial MSW, things no sticker fee or no permit fee when you go to the disposal area, or paying for mattresses and miscellaneous things, other items that require a fee associated with it. We've had very strong revenue at the disposal area year after year. I've underestimated that. I've also underestimated our expenses associated with it. But it's a good business model. I know one of your questions is, are there any pricing changes? Because so much of this is driven by market conditions at the disposal area, I wait until typically April to make my recommendation for the fees to the Board of Selectmen. Usually we get on the agenda sometime after town meeting in May and set the fees accordingly then. We did experience this past fall, we did experience an increase in our tip fee of C&D, which I went to the board, and for the first time, we had a mid-season or a mid-fiscal year increase in the C&D that was voted. It was a meager $5, but we like to be at market conditions for that material. If you have, excuse me, the FY19 budget, I believe, is the third page of my printout. It has, on the expense side, it simply has all the pluses and minuses associated with the budget. It has the TA cuts, the budgets. And I think rather than me review each and every one of those, I gave you a macro review of the DPW budget as an overall. I would like to just entertain questions on the expense, if that would be appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely. Any questions, starting with Larry, on the expenses?
Budget as instructed, what's as instructed?
In
the budget.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Valentine, as instructed simply means the budget instructions the TA sent out would say, level fund this, apparently 2% that. Sometimes we have data that would say, allows the administrator to say, water's not going to go up. We're not going to have an increase in that. We're not going to have an increase in natural gas. Or we are going to have one. As instructed is just that. We follow the town administrator's budget instructions.
We're talking expense, but I'd like to ask one capital item. You have in the budget for 3 dump trucks, basically. My question is, as we try to control the budget, are those all required at one, they're all being replaced at one time? Can one of those be moved a year back to kind of, flatten that expense?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Valentine. Each year, as part of the capital outlay presentation, I produce a very colorful spreadsheet that you probably don't have at your disposal, FinCom may, where I outline all the DPW vehicles that warrant replacement. The total replacement cost on that is about $4.5 million worth of rolling stock. Okay? For this particular year, we had a total of, $316,000 request. The administrator asked if I could do without one of the requested items this year. We took a sweeper body off. Okay? Replacing 7% of your stock each year seems pretty reasonable. I'll do a plug for the sweeper body. This is not just a sweeper body. This is our vacuum truck. The request for the $125,000 is the pony motor, the motor that runs the vacuum apparatus, as well as the entire body. We have a brilliant mechanic, Kyle Edson, who joined us a couple years ago. Absolutely couldn't ask for a better guy. He has brought our vehicle maintenance budget on budget for the first time ever since I've been director. Right? The guy does remarkable things. Part of being able to do that is replace your vehicles on a regular basis. I have already smoothed those cash flows out. The number that I presented as capital outlay was significantly higher than what the vehicle maintenance manager was running. My process is, they come in with a recommendation, I review the vehicles with them, and then I smooth the cash flows out in an operation. We wanted to replace the sweeper body rather than the whole machine for two reasons. One, a new vacuum sweeper is 300 grand, and two, this is a pre-tier 1 chassis, tier 1 emissions chassis. All of your new heavy equipment is tier 2 emissions, and they require more money to maintain than the pre-emission models do. So although our chassis for the street sweeper is in good shape, it was that it's cheaper to run in the long run, and if we just replace this body, we'll be able to get another 15 years out of it. The administrator asked if I could postpone, take one thing out. That was the one thing. The 1-ton dump trucks are the workhorse of the fleet. And I know there's 3 of them there, and that is a consequence of me smoothing out the cash flows in the request.
Thank you. You all set, Larry?
Yeah.
Julie, you got any questions on the expense side?
The only question I have goes back to the construction debris that we talked about, that we increased the rates, and I suggested at the time we increase them double, triple, I think it was. And I still think that, and I see in your notes that you're gonna be looking at that pricing in the spring and how to proceed. But I'm hoping that we look hard at that, because it seems to be one of our biggest costs, so that'd be my only, other than vehicles and understanding that you've already cut back, I think we have to look hard at vehicles this year, but thank you.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On the salary side, the 8.98% increase, what's the driver of that?
You have me at a loss, Mr. Howe. Total salary and wage was up 2.86%. I will,
On your breakdown of DPW salaries.
okay.
Full-time equivalencies, 18 are 904,000, 19 is 986.
He's got it. Right, Larry?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a retirement that happened back in August at the disposal area. That resulted in 3 essentially unilateral moves within the whole DPW umbrella. I actually had a gentleman transfer from highway to disposal who took a lower position to do so. I had a unilateral move from Boo, who moved from Parks and Cemetery Manager to Highway Manager. That was a 0 cost. I had 1 promotion as a foreman, which offset the retirement. All that was a net of 0, moving the people around, but where they are in the categories made it look like there was a large increase somewhere and a decrease somewhere else.
Is that it, Don?
Yeah.
Janelle? Ben,
Yeah.
question?
So, Link, I was thinking back about the storms this winter. Almost all of them have been on Fridays. And you just said, we spent 12 grand in overtime last weekend, right? And looking at the overtime numbers in the budget, they add up to 181,244 and 75 cents. So my question is this: can we stagger staff, because DPW really is a 24/7 job, similar to fire and police? Public safety is tantamount with roads and whatnot. Can we stagger staff? And I know Chris might say there's a union issue, but going forward, when we hire people, I know, for instance, when I was looking into community center being open on Sundays, and I asked about custodians in other towns and how they operate, they stagger them a 5-day work week, but maybe somebody works Wednesday through Sunday. And I'm wondering if DPW could be run that way too, and save this $181,000 in overtime somewhat.
Thank you. I do just that at the disposal area. As a DPW director, I have the authority in their contract with 2 weeks' notice to rearrange their schedules.
Okay.
I've never had to use that unilateral authority. Voluntarily, we do that at the disposal area because we are trucking further than we ever have before, and longer waits, there's less outlets, it made sense to have these guys start at 5 or 6 in the morning and knock off at 1 or 2, and then if need be, we could put another body in that trailer and take a later load. So we do just that. So it makes sense over at the disposal area. Most of the time, other than these winter events or storm events or so forth, our work is fairly scheduled. And as such, you need crews. Some of the stuff we do is independent, where 1 or 2 guys could do a street sweeping, for instance. That's, a 1 or 2 man show. Most of the stuff takes an entire crew of 4 or 5 guys, like a brushing the side of the road. That's a major component that we do. That takes a bunch of bodies all at once, cohesively working as a team. So I don't see there's a lot of opportunity as far as highway work goes. Park, cemetery, facility maintenance, I think all of that is more other than the storms that we've experienced on a far more frequent basis than we used to. Most of our work is scheduled. We try to schedule work and make it, you schedule things for when you have the most people there, honestly. So I certainly take a look at it and see if something makes sense. The custodial is another issue entirely. Those do currently operate on staggered staffs. We have not delved into the Sunday position yet, or how we're going to address that. But those do start from people starting at, 6 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night.
When I was looking at the salaries and the, where was it? The personnel, salaries and the personnel charts. You have custodial salaries singled out or categorized, but I was wondering on the personnel chart, what category they're in.
Excellent question. They are not, and I have an answer for why. I believe Selectman Brown's referring to that spreadsheet that shows
Yes.
DPW staffing.
Yes.
To be able to compare apples and apples, we've intentionally left custodial staff, which I believe is 5 full-time positions, off of that chart. So if we go back to this, I believe Selectman Ballantyne mentioned the override, the failed override 12 years ago, which I try to forget. If we go back to that point, and then the board wanted to compare DPW staffing to now, and I added that in, then it looks like, well, we're ahead of where we were back in 2005. And that's not the case. I've added in facility management. We've centralized several functions. So started with vehicles, we added 1 person, and if you go down the chart, look in vehicle maintenance, you'll see where that one was. Facility maintenance, that was shored up, that was from a 2-person to now a 4-person, so forth. I didn't add the custodial in there. I probably should, but I didn't, so that people looking at the chart didn't think, wow, they got everything they want. They're over where they were in 2005, which isn't the case.
So 28 isn't the real number. What's the real number? 32?
35.
35, okay. And I had one more.
33.
33?
Math.
Isn't your job to give me accurate information?
I just did. I just told you your math was wrong.
Yes.
Good job.
I caught that, Kim.
Thank you, Mike.
I just wanted to point out that, again, when I was doing research with you and Kim on the treasure chest, and we came up with the costs to run that, I just want to point out that it actually costs more to run the treasure chest compared to the increase excluding the disposal costs of $8,400. Just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
We came up with more than 10,000.
You all set?
Yep.
Great. You don't need to respond to that?
That's a pointing out.
Jack?
Mark,
No questions.
Lori,
No question.
Ed?
Oh, just one comment. When you were talking about your increase of overall of 5.9, given that a lot of that expense is in increase in the C&D budget for disposal of that, and the cost of disposing other special products. all of those, though, have a revenue on the other side of that, as opposed to just an out expense to the town.
Mr. Chairman, most of that increase was C and D. I believe 175,000 out of 185,000 was C and D. We set that, priced our tip fee, of what we charge at the gate, market conditions. We try to mirror what the private sector as well as Town of Yarmouth does. We have an excellent model, and we pay somewhere between 78 and I believe $85 per ton. Might have an increase for next fiscal year coming up. That's minor. Plus, it's called a handling and hauling of $15 a ton. Our margin is $45, $50 a ton. So for every dollar the town gives us for that function, we turn a rough, in approximate numbers, about $1.50 back, which offsets other costs at the disposal, since overall it's run as a break-even business.
Thank you, Link.
Anything further, Ed?
No.
John?
That was pretty much the question I had there. But how many choices do contractors have on the Cape right now to go with their C and D, I guess you call it?
For Cape Cod, I believe Orleans would be Paul Daniels. Harwich would be us. Dennis is S&J Esco. The town of Yarmouth. Barnstable has a contractor right next to their disposal area that I don't know the name of, and then you'd have the town of Bourne. Outlets are limited. Most municipalities have chosen to not contend with the commercial side of this business and raise their prices to north of $200 a ton.
And you pretty much monitor what those other haulers are doing to stay in line with those?
That's why I was in front of the board last fall recommending a mid-season or mid-fiscal year increase, and that was because the town of Yarmouth actually increased by $5 after I made my recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to set the fees.
Thank you.
Dana?
Thank you. I just want to make it clear that when we discuss overtime and all that, that it does not include these storms and things that are out of the ordinary, that I think this department's always been supportive of any time you come before us as far as needing something for a particular event. We've always covered those. We do appreciate that you work as well as you can within your budget, but if you have something extraordinary, you've always been invited to bring those before us, and we take those separately if we have to. We don't want to bust a budget just because Mother Nature came along and did something different. But in general, we'll be looking at overtime everywhere. It's just going to be the nature of this year's beast. The selectmen put out a budget message asking for a 2% increase, and both schools and the government side's up over 3% if you don't count the debt. So we'll just be looking at everything without laying off people and those kind of things.
Thank you, Dana.
Lincoln, thank you. A question for you. What drives cemetery overtime, building maintenance overtime, disposal overtime, and custodial overtime? What drives each one of those four areas? A couple of them seem a little odd to me as a layperson.
They are all completely different. I wish I had a pat answer for you, or a standard answer. I do not. Disposal, everything is a just-in-time type of inventory. We don't have places to store things, so everything that comes in needs to go out. We're at the mercy of vendors, which hold our drivers up and cause a fair amount of overtime. That overtime budget has grown over the years for that one fact that we're traveling further and the outlets of disposal have decreased. That's a pretty simple answer. Highway is everything that comes up. I mean, usually Mother Nature is unpredictable, and a lot of this is in response to those. In the budget, we do quantify the overtime in a certain manner, but in actuality, it's in response to conditions that we're thrown.
And I understand that. But cemetery overtime, building maintenance overtime,
Facility maintenance, this past weekend, the facility maintenance crew of 4 did not work with the highway, yet they had their own set of challenges, had to replace windows that blew out at the community center, leaking roofs they had to address, and so, and I'm sure some other things I'm missing. Yes, also, there's 2 call-in lists in their contract. It says this, so you have disposal is one call-in list. All the other departments are under another call-in list. So it's a rotating basis of who actually gets called. And they may, like highway, may call parks or cemetery personnel if they're the next ones on the list and can do the job.
okay, thank you.
Like
Mike?
the only question I have, I get your revolving vehicle list. Why does the cemetery need a F-350? I think I know the answer, but
I think it's a 250. It's a 350? Yeah, we call those one-ton dump trucks. That's what they all do. They pull equipment. They pull trailers to and from jobs. They move personnel to and
know what
from
they
jobs.
do. What do you need one for the cemetery for? I think all we do in the cemetery is mow, right?
Well,
Dig holes.
they move, brought from just this weekend. The cemetery department has been working on highways. They've been cleaning out the cemeteries of debris, of trees and
So
fallen
you
debris.
use it for other things besides the cemetery?
And snow and ice removal. So all the vehicles we ever have, and you look at the price of these trucks, and it seems high to me as a DPW director. These are fully equipped vehicles with a dump body on them, with a plow, central hydraulics. You add all that up, and Sanders, and you add all that up, and that's the cost of vehicles these days. Off of I believe Plymouth County contract, or state, either state contract, Plymouth County contract, or the one we use for the police and fire vehicles.
So it's more than mowing lawns.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Chris?
I just want to walk through a little bit on the capital items, if there are any questions in regards to that. So we have under Article 9, which is items under 50,000, Albro House and Brooks Academy, the boiler replacement. Obviously, if there's any questions, that's a Sean question, that's $40,000. Under Article 10, the Facility Maintenance and Repair Fund, it has the update and replace the town's energy management system, HVAC, at Town Hall, Community Center, Fire Station 1, and Police Department at $140,000. Community carpet, Town Hall carpet replacement at $130,000. And then I guess also it kind of falls under is the Cultural Center subsidy. I've changed the name of that of $125,000. So there are those items. And then the 2 others, Article 21 of the dump trucks, and as Lincoln mentioned that he did originally have 4. I did decrease that. I was trying to get him down to a 300 range, or even below that 300 range for vehicle replacement. But in knowing the board's wishes, we did decrease that from 4 down to 3. And then on road maintenance, just want to make sure for full disclosure, that road maintenance, we generally try to pay that off over a 5-year cycle, so it's no real additional cost. This year, however, we did include in there $100,000, I think was the number, for design in the West Harwich section of 28. So just for full disclosure, those are the elements, I think, in DPW related. I think those are the ones that are all related. So if there are any questions in regards to that, Lincoln and Sean are here to answer those.
Okay. Start with Larry on that. Questions on capital items?
Not at this time, no.
Julie?
No.
Don?
Yeah, the trucks, gas or diesel?
Diesel.
Okay, thanks.
Janelle?
I was just wondering about the carpet. What determines when carpet needs to be replaced? And
I
maybe
have to defer to the Master Chief.
I mean, because I look around this room and it looks pretty good.
You walk outside the door and you'll trip over the rip.
Yeah.
There's a rip out there, okay.
Excellent answer.
So don't walk out the door.
We're not that clumsy.
Rest.
Carefully, I never noticed it.
All set. Jack?
Any other questions? FinCom? John?
On the capital, Chris, where does the pet crematorium fall under? I didn't hear you mention that, but does it fall under the
Under the
DPW reign?
Actually, that request was specifically from the Cemetery Commission.
They'll be in later.
Civilian land, okay.
She's not on the agenda, but.
Yeah,
No,
she's
but
not.
I thought that might be a capital
We
problem.
did invite her to
I see
the
cemetery.
meeting last week. I don't know if I followed up and invited her for today. But certainly, if you want to have her come in to talk about that,
She's coming.
she is coming today?
Yes.
All right.
This wasn't from his.
Oh, okay.
I think she had an obligation last week, so she had to come in the afternoon. So she was going to be in the catch-alls. So she'll be here this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm just learning the departments, and I see cemetery, and I don't know where the lines of delineation begin and start there.
Yeah, no, fair question.
Mike?
Mr. Chair, we're cemetery maintenance. We mow the grass, take care of the cemeteries, pick up everything, work very cooperatively with the cemetery administrator, who does planning functions, burials, operations from that standpoint.
Great, thank you.
That's it, Dana?
Yep, thank you.
So just one comment. I certainly appreciate all the other things that your department's dragged into and not dragged into. But the Albro House last year, the demolition, that wasn't in your budget, you did it. The work you're doing for the harbor, the quote you gave on the harbor. The middle school, which Sean's done a phenomenal job with the middle school and staff, was a building that was ignored for a long time, that when you walk in it now, you can be proud of that building. And he seems to be making the old systems work.
And soon the library.
Soon the library, but, certainly things that are not normal and I think have been referred to as indirect costs in the past, and people want to know what every building costs. But you do an awful lot of work in addition to what's in your budget, so thank you. And thank you, Sean.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Kim.
Well, Kim's the brains.
I know.
She tells him what to do and he does it. So,
Not always.
right.
If you sit down and think about it, the DPW in one form or another touches nearly every resident's life. I would have to say, since everybody has to drive, you use the roads, which are one of our costliest infrastructure. Thank you. The men and women of this organization, I just can't say enough about them. I've surrounded myself with good people, and they make me look good, which isn't easy.
Well, it shows throughout the town.
Next up is fire at page 167.
I'm gonna throw in the comment about the work he does in the state park for request for select. I figured I'd leave that alone. I'll leave that one to be judged on social media. No,
It was on the one
state park, yeah. The road that everyone accesses the pond from. I know. I'll just tell her, you guys are all set.
Couple years ago.
She's already printed them all anyway, so it's okay.
But every time you stop,
I know you guys have most of this, but
first time I said,
it's
oh
extra copies.
my God, yeah, exactly.
Well, they're so
Because I
ahead
was
of
probably
us.
sitting on the
David,
hill.
how are you?
Yeah.
Good, how are you?
But it worked, yeah, obviously
Europe
it worked
is-
well, yes.
Europe
Been in my
is-
backyard this morning.
What's that?
Big doe and a big buck right in
Still
my
have
backyard.
horns?
Still had horns.
It's unbelievable. I
Those-
keep some.
I mean, like, they were this long, they were little ones,
But,
but
you know,
No,
I can't
that was in the
believe
packet.
probably about 3.5 foot,
dog
you know, to the middle of the back.
Emails?
so
I can't believe they're still carrying that one.
Chase it down, yeah.
Somebody else was talking about that too.
I said I had to get my copy. I had
Had to go, right.
Took one out 2 weeks ago with the deputy's car.
Yeah, I got
Oh,
it.
did you?
But it's
Yeah,
like,
well,
you know, some mornings he doesn't want to go out.
It's a sudden stop.
Our new residents will
Yeah,
not
it.
stop.
I just got back from the Allegash,
And he'll get out.
and they have these signs called high hit area. Leave the Allegash and drive down to Fort Kent to get dinner. You have to drive 15 miles an hour, because the entire way they feed them down.
Occasionally, I want to go out and yell at them.
Do you want the data?
Yeah, I'm just curious, I missed that one, yeah.
As a joke, but he said,
Yeah.
"Well, he looks so serious."
Yeah, he's like best I can, getting the damn
I
dog
didn't realize
back.
you take it wrong way.
No, I know, it's, you know,
Because I was like, Michael was, and they came over.
from
when-
Sandy Robbins.
March 2nd, wow, okay.
Well, yeah, it was for the March 3rd meeting.
The 18-wheelers.
Right, that was the big difference.
I can't get on that.
John Aaron's brother was,
I didn't have any trouble getting on. So, yeah.
So I am connected.
Is everybody gonna do this?
I wanted my budget spreadsheet.
And for some reason, and I don't know if it's based on my Dropbox and my capability because I've maybe maxed out, but I can't even open 2017.
I lost my Dodge Coronet that way
Gone
to Maine.
completely from everybody's or
Yeah,
just me?
yeah, yeah.
Because I can't
Cost
see
me
them.
$75 to buy that car.
Heard right by your house a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it's, we, at one
We
point,
need a
we
lot of
had
IT help.
6 deer in our backyard. When they started ripping apart Thompson's Field with the bucket loader there, all the wildlife showed up in our yard.
Are we ready to get going?
You printed the budget?
We're not on a break, are we?
No, it's not a break.
Are we ready to get going? Don?
For that, yeah.
That was
We need,
156 pages.
break.
I didn't print that.
Yes.
We have a scheduled break at 10 o'clock.
Linda's doing it. I expect peanut butter.
No, everybody has nut allergies these days. Peanut butter allowed.
Okay, Jack's back. We're gonna start again. Chief.
Good morning.
Deputy Chief.
Just like to say, we continue to serve the public every day. I think the folks and visitors to the town of Harwich are blessed with some really talented and committed professionals, and I'm proud to work with them. We answered the questionnaire that was sent out to us. That was answered fully. We have, I met with staff and the deputy, who, by the way, is the brains of the operation as well.
We're in trouble.
We did read and follow the instructions as presented by you, Mr. Chairman, from the Board of Selectmen, and we have made cuts. I think you know who I am and how we operate. When you say to bring a budget in, we bring a budget in. We make cuts before we get here. We make cuts before we go see the administrator. We take that very seriously. We have to find that balance from cuts to service. I have no intentions of reduction in service. The people don't want it, they don't expect it. They expect the best, and we deliver the best. But, having said that, we also understand you have a budget to meet, and we have done that. We work very closely with the town administration, with Chris and Carol and Bob. We work very closely with them, and we do the best we can with what we have. And I think, I feel very good about our budget, and I feel good that from the support from the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the citizens. We work hard to purchase large items with grants, both state and federal. We were able to work into the contract position of provisional firefighters, and those firefighters that we use as provisionals is a program that is a win-win. We presently have we're down 5 people. 3 to line of duty injuries, neck and shoulder. We have 1 out that I encourage physical fitness. We have to stay in shape as best we can, because that allows them to do their jobs, and it also reduces expensive line of duty injuries. So as part of that, we have one of the things that we do is we have a pretty good hockey team. Well, one of them broke their ankle playing hockey. So
Broke is an understatement.
So, and then we have 1 in the academy. So we're down 5. But the provisional position allows us to bring people that are prospective employees to come in and to see how they work out. They fill in for some of those positions. We don't go 1 for 1. We can use up to we use usually 1 or 2, and that allows us to see how they work out. And it also, we bring them in at a hiring step, so we keep the money down, and it offsets that word overtime. It helps offset that, dramatically helps offset that. So we continue to work with the town and the administrator to work within our budget, and we did bring in a budget that was less than 1%. As mentioned before with the police department, Chief Gilmet, we have 2 positions that were funded last year were not filled. And I'm certainly looking to both boards to support us, to allow us to fill those funded positions. And that will help make our operation work better, and it does address, not a lot, does address some overtime. The question was asked to the chief, Chief Gumet, are you gonna look for more? I would say no, not in my tenure. I think once we get these, if we are allowed to fill these positions, we're gonna be good for a bit. You know, we're gonna have to take a look. We're gonna work with the town, in the administration to say, what is that balance of people in overtime? And we're gonna be good for a bit. I'm comfortable with where we are, and we will make things work. With that, I will turn it over to the deputy.
Thank you, Chief.
Good morning. If you have the information that I presented, I don't think that there's a need to go line by line through everything else. There are some bigger numbers when you look at the increase. We did do similar to the police department. Because we run technically 4 separate budgets within between salary and wages and expenses, we have the EMS side and the fire side. Some of that is not always convenient for operations. So this year we moved some money from the EMS training side that was Fire Academy backfill into the regular overtime budget. So it artificially inflated that number up, but there's a corresponding decrease on the other side. I think that the bottom line is with the position money that's in there, the budget increase is about $3,900 from last year. And that was through a lot of pencil sharpening and a hard, honest look at how we operate the fire department. We did 4,205 incidents last year. We talk about the overtime money. There's 2,068 hours of emergency overtime and over 5,000 hours of station coverage overtime that make up that number. When we want to start talking about decreasing that overtime number, the only way that those particular numbers come down is with increased staffing, and that's going to be what we have to look at. The rest of the overtime number is really based on contractual leave and what our shift minimum is. The staffing that we're asking for this year, the 2 positions, would be the first time in 30 years that we will increase the shift minimum from 6 to 7. On its face, that doesn't seem like a significant impact. Right now, we're running 2 shifts with 7-man minimum, or 6. All shifts are 6. The maximum shift strength on 2 is 8, and the maximum on the other 2 is 7. With people out right now, those are all down. But the impact will be is we will be able to handle that first medical call from the headquarters district with 1 station, which currently right now we're moving 2 stations to do. And then there's a trickle down. The offset that we showed was about a $30,000 decrease in overtime, we feel, for not having to hire that extra person back when that second medical call comes in. The chief mentioned grants. Last year we put in for the Lucas chest compression grants. The grants program has changed a lot. It's become a lot more competitive. It used to be a program that was designed to be written by firefighters and awarded by firefighters. It's now gotten into written by professionals to be awarded by firefighters. And you can have a really good grant program and show a really good need and still not. It used to be 85% was kind of you had to score at least an 85. Last year they didn't get below 96%. So you have to really be diligent in both your project and how you word your granting request. The big thing that's kind of looming out there for us is our self-contained breathing apparatus with standard changes. After so many versions of the standard, we have to replace them to become compliant. We're about 5 years away from that. We tried to write a grant for it this year. By the grant program standards, we don't qualify. Our gear isn't old enough. The standard changes should come out in January, should have come out in January. With that change, our equipment is now old enough. Next year, we'll be writing about $300,000 grant, which would be a 5% match for the town to try and address that problem. And we'll write it as many years as we can going forward until we come to a drop dead date and we have to make a decision internally to fix the problem. Some other projects that we probably wouldn't normally be able to accomplish, or we would, but it would take a long time. A lot of our valves and equipment, they don't age well. The valves that sit on the side of the engine constantly have water back to them. They actually corrode. When you take them off, they look like barnacles on them from just sitting with water on them 24 hours a day. We wanted to upgrade both our nozzles and our valves this year. It's about a $7,500 request That's what the grant program is. The town's match is about $3,700. So that's, we try and put things that we wouldn't normally do, and then we can do it all in one shot versus piecemealing it over several years through a grant program. The two categories of radios that are on the capital plan, the townwide radio system is a backup system for police and fire, but it's gonna be the normal operating system for DPW, water, harbor master, everybody else that we can put onto it. That, last year, Chris was able to put money aside. We funded the first portion of that. We got the water department on board and the backbone of the system built. And we have some equipment left. We'll get the rec department done and a backup for the police department started. This year, there's another $100,000 in, build the rest of that system out. DPW is gonna be the big factor in that. We'll get them taken care of and then just continue to go forward until eventually all departments will be on one common operating system. And again, it'll be the backup for the police and fire. But we'll be able to, over this weekend, we're calling foremen on cell phones when we could just pick up the radio and say, we need a crew here, need a crew there. And that would have been where it proved itself invaluable. The other radios are the public safety radios that police and fire are using. This came under we just decided to consolidate into one thing, and it's been under the fire department for several years. The state police is in the process of upgrading the system, and that's kind of the moving target with this. They're down to a 4-year plan. They should be cut over in about 4 years, so we changed it in the capital plan. We originally had it at 5 years out. We're down to 4 years. But again, trying to spread some of that impact out over multiple years and still accomplish what we need to do. Also, in looking at the capital plan with Station 2 on there, with an engine on there, with an ambulance, and trying to push things out, we moved the ladder truck out 2 years just to try and push some expense further down the road.
I'm just touching capital.
Yeah.
Yep, let me touch on capital. The big capital project there is Station 2. It's been on the capital plan for quite some time. The numbers have moved, but we will be coming before all of you, before town meeting with bid pricing. That process starts this month. So we have an estimate out there around $6 million, but we will have firm signed bid prices for both committees prior to town meeting. Now, it might be the day before town meeting, but the point being, we will not present Station 2 without bid pricing. Firm bid pricing. The ambulance, it's a 2-year, we buy one every other year. We're up this year for an ambulance. They do a lot of work. We have to study. We do have a 4th ambulance now, and I'm surprised at the number of times we have 4 ambulances on the road. But I guess from a business point of view, every time the ambulance goes out, there's some revenue being generated. Doesn't cover the cost of the fire department. I understand that, but it does bring back some revenue to the town. So that is another capital expenditure. That's on the plan, every 2 years for an ambulance. We have inserted this year replacement of the deputy chief's car, and the explanation is the same as you heard when I replaced my car. We reuse police cars as best we can. The town has a great system of reusing vehicles where we can. We reuse vehicles internally. So to say that the deputy chief is gonna get a new car isn't the whole picture. The picture is, at the end of the story, is that we're gonna replace the fire inspector's vehicle that has 200,000 miles on it. And the mechanics have said, that's it. We're out, we're done. We can't do any more with this vehicle, which was a police car. So by us replacing the deputy chief's car, the trickle down is that we extend the life of the rest of the fleet, as they did. He's driving my car. It was mine. I got a new car. It trickles down. Doesn't mean that anybody's we watch the mileage, we watch usage, and we stretch these vehicles as best we can. So when we don't replace something at the top, it affects the entire fleet. It affects us, it affects the mechanics. So we're not increasing the fleet, but at the end of the day, we're replacing a car that the fire inspector uses that has 200,000 miles on it. You've gotten your money's worth out of that vehicle. With that, I would entertain questions.
David, you're all set? Yeah. Great. Larry?
I have a question on the charts that you gave us.
Yep.
the comparison of incidents per firefighter based on total personnel, then you have one on minimum strength,
Yep.
shift strength. What are you trying to tell us with these charts? What's the
The deputy will give you a really good explanation of that.
So I think what
I
it's,
just want to get the point of this, the comparison.
so the comparison was trying to show that other departments, and this doesn't include Dennis, most recently just hired 8 off the Safer grant, and to the overtime conversation, with their 8 was a significant, part of that was a significant reduction in their overtime, because they don't cover the station, but.
Until year
what-
4.
What's that?
Until year 4.
Until year 4. But they did the grant the right way, not to go off topic, but they did the grant the right way, because in year 1, they budgeted the increase, so that when year 4 comes, it won't be a surprise, which is not what Sandwich did, and Sandwich is gonna pay that bill in another year. But what I was trying to show, and if you look at the charts, and I was just trying to give a little bit more information, is if you look at the difference in Harwich, everybody else is kind of flatlined. They've maintained their personnel to their run increases.
Yeah, I guess my main question was, why did you show total versus minimum strength?
Because it's trying to show the workload, so our minimum shift has not increased in the 30 years, where these other places have increased their minimum shift. So when you look at their work per firefighter, it's kind of stayed at a steady plateau. It's gone up a little bit, where ours has kind of gone up more
We run at
significantly.
minimum shift most of the time.
That's what you're trying to
The
get.
the occurrence of every
total
scheduled person coming to work is the exception rather than the
Yeah.
rule, due to vacation, sickness, injuries. So we base a lot of what we do on the minimum.
Okay.
So that's all, just trying to show the, difference, where other towns have increased staffing and increased their shift minimum. We've
Yeah, I
increased
guess my-
staffing, but we've kind of kept the minimum the same, so.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
Yep.
What is the minimum shift versus the total shift?
Yep, so if everybody comes to work on any given day, it's either 7 or 8 right now, depending on which shift working, and the minimum is always 6. And the
3 and
major-
3.
And the majority of the time is 6.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Julie?
I see that you also have contributed 7,500 to IT, so
Yes.
our dollars are climbing there. The only other question I have, and I brought this up before, is the ambulance billing, and I'm just wondering, in terms of moving forward with that, do we have the ability to, when we're billing, and is it an outside company that bills, right?
Yes.
So I'm just wondering if we can look harder at that, because I think that if we actually sent out these bills with a cover letter with instructions, I think a lot of people don't understand. They're getting this bill, and it hasn't gone to their insurance company, because you can't do that. You can't bill them and their insurance companies. If we had that information and people were submitting to their insurance companies, understanding that that bill was not totally theirs to pay, we might actually get more than 1.5 million. So I just think that ultimately we're getting these bills, and for services well provided, they're important services, as you've said, and I just think that overall it's confusing. I don't think people understand, and I think that we might actually see more revenue if people understood that that bill was to be submitted to their insurance company. And ultimately, we might also relieve the burden on elderly people.
On the
who
ambulance
don't.
billing, I would certainly defer to administration on that
Yeah.
and take whatever suggestions they give to us to streamline that, and then
Is
we'll
that-
make sure that the billing company does it how you would like it done.
Yeah, and you don't, thank you, because you're not getting those funds.
No.
Right. Thanks. That's my only.
No, we electronically send our information to the billing company, and that's the extent
That's
of
it.
our involvement.
Right, okay. So I
We
think
could set up a meeting with the billing company and just see what suggestions they
Yeah.
have as to how to make it more
I mean, I
efficient.
think
And
that
if we send letters or instructional material, I think that's a reasonable
But
request.
I think part of the process is, the first bill doesn't necessarily go to the patient. The only time the patient gets contacted before the bill goes to the insurance company is if they haven't signed. We try and get everybody to sign.
Okay.
So when we sign, that then gives the insurance company the ability to bill,
To
or
be-
the billing
yeah,
company to bill
to
the
be
insurance
billed.
company.
Okay,
If they haven't signed, then they have to send something out to them, says, we need you to sign this, and then, so it delays it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And sometimes it's just not possible to get the signature on a medical call.
right.
It's the
no,
last thing we're worried
understood.
about.
Right, exactly.
But so I don't believe that they're actually getting a bill that then they have to submit to the insurance company in every case. In some cases, maybe, but not in
Yeah,
every case.
okay. I'm just thinking overall, and I understand it doesn't really directly affect your budget, but ultimately it does if we
Yep.
have more money, so that's my only comment.
Don?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of a comment, I mean, than a question, but I mean, were we not to fill the two positions, because everybody keeps calling them new positions, the taxpayers have been paying for them irrespective of whether they got what they were paying for.
Correct.
So they're not new to the taxpayers.
They're not.
Correct.
Janelle?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thank you for your hard work and pencil sharpening.
Jack?
Mark?
And I don't have a microphone, so I'll let you talk about the detail. But 2 PSAs, I believe everyone needs to change their smoke detector batteries today. You guys have a blood drive coming up?
Yeah, so typically, the changing the batteries is when we change the clocks, so they usually do it in the fall, coincides with Fire Prevention Week, it's a nice thing, so if you didn't do them in the fall, we're changing the clocks again, so do them. And then there's a blood drive, Thursday, the 15th, I think it's 11 to 3 at the fire station. It's the Cape Cod Hospital's doing a Battle of the Badges, so this is the Harwich Fire Department's time to do it. I don't know if they're gonna do Harwich Police or if they're gonna, how they're doing the whole thing, but there's definitely a Battle of the Badges going on. I'll get the exact dates on the blood drive. I just had it up and I forgot.
People can find the details.
Yep,
Yeah, on the
yeah,
website,
it's on the website and it's on the Facebook page.
And we did have some issues with folks running generators either in or too close to the houses, and some folks went 3 and 4 days with no power. I mean, we still have a couple without power. So it's real important to, use some common sense and don't, if you have a generator, please, please, keep it away from your house, because the carbon monoxide is a silent killer in it, and I mean that very seriously.
Just to that point, Chief, too, I've been in a town where we've had emergencies, and, one of the things I never realized, when people have generators, the wires may be dead, and you may not see any lights on the street, but some of them, if they're not wired in right, they
They backfeed.
energize those wires going outside.
do.
So any wire that's down is one that could be, have juice in it, whether it's through the company or through your generator.
And just to the battery point, the other thing that Duracell was out doing a promo this week. They were going to the fire stations and giving batteries away. With extended power outages, your smoke detectors are running on batteries for that entire time. So when your power comes back, the first thing you should do is replace all your batteries, because even though they may have been brand new, they've been supplying power to that device for the whole week.
Thank you.
Another real quick thing on that is when the folks out there, if you see a barricade, don't drive around it. There was a very dramatic, and we posted on our website, of a tragic incident in New Jersey where someone did that and they lost their life. So,
Thank you, Norm.
11 to 5 on Thursday.
Mark, anything else?
That's it.
Lori?
2 quick questions. The radios that you were talking about, are they the state mandated digital, or the ones the state's moving to?
Yes.
Yes,
Yep.
okay, good. And I'm sorry, I don't remember all the details for the capital plan, but the breathing equipment you're talking about that you're trying to get grants for, is that on the capital plan in the event we don't get that?
We were gonna have it on for this year, but because of the grant, we didn't anticipate getting it, so we have delayed that a year
Okay.
and put the nozzles in for what we believe we can get for this year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Ed?
I think very impressed with your budget presentation. Very happy with your service. Just a heads up, Cranberry Festival won't be needing details for a bonfire this year with the return of the fireworks. We decided to eliminate the bonfire. Last year, with last year's bonfire, although spectacular, the lack of attention that some parents gave their young children, dancing too close, got just a little too scary for the committee, quite honestly. So we decided to cancel that, but thank you. And as to the PSA, I'd urge everybody who is capable of and has the time to donate blood. Very important thing. Now have crossed my time on Cape Cod, my 7-gallon mark, so please join me. And then I'm just going to sneak over to the community center for about an hour. I've arranged for some people to talk at a meeting over there, and I feel I should go and welcome them.
John?
Thank you, Chief, for your service there, and it was a great response, I thought, through town. I mean, and Just to follow up on Julie's question on the ambulance billing, you generated a 1.5 million, which is great. Do we know what the balance of is outstanding that's been billed, that has been collected?
I don't.
I don't think we have that number. We can get that number for you. I would just caution that when we have people that are on Medicare or Medicaid, we may bill them at $1,200 or whatever the ambulance ride is, but we know that we're only gonna receive, I think it's $400, something in that range. So we will factor that in, and we can provide that information to you.
But the 1.5 is the hard number,
The
right?
1.5 is
That's
a hard
actual
number of what we
receipts.
actually
Yeah.
receive.
That you generate, yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
I think it's also important to note on that whatever that balance is, being that we just voted to remove $800,000 from that balance that we're never gonna collect, that balance is not a real balance. So we shouldn't count on that balance.
Like a forgiveness of the debt or whatever?
We basically, the board just
It wasn't
voted
worth
to get rid of old debt.
Yeah.
You know, when the ambulance billing was originally proposed, we weren't going to aggressively go after taxpayers that couldn't pay that bill. And we've honored that. And I think at this point, there's the balance that's created for the Medicare reason, as well as we do an ambulance waiver, that somebody can plead a hardship and we'll write it off. It's a changing balance, and I wouldn't want the finance committee or the board to count on that money.
Okay. And how long does an ambulance last, just curious?
6 years.
6 years? 8 years?
Eight
Six.
years.
6 years.
Eight.
Eight years,
Yeah,
well, 8 years
four,
now,
now
we're
they're
gonna
eight,
know
yeah.
8 years, yeah.
And-
We're gonna look at that schedule, a replacement, will have to be reviewed, we haven't done that yet, because we went from 3 to 4, but we'll have to see. They get moved too, like we do with cars. The newest ambulance generally goes at the headquarters, then we move it to Station 2, then we move it back at Station 2, then we move the old, they get cycled through as best we can. But they'll have, when they leave us, they'll have 160, 170,000 miles on them.
And is there much value in a
We
used,
usually get about $10,000 trade-in,
and a new one is?
340.
Thank you.
They just miss.
Dana?
I'm all set, thank you. Good job.
We could buy a used ambulance.
Well, John stole one of my questions, which is the ambulance backlog, shall we say, of money owed. So we won't worry about that one. Dana?
Just on that note, Alan Thompson's here. Him and I were both part of this board when that was put into place, and that's exactly correct. We were not intending to harass people to collect money on those bills. We just wanted to send it out and have the insurance companies pay what they pay and call it good.
Did I hear you right about the cost of the self-contained breathing apparatus that we're gonna see in a few years? What was that? What was
About
the amount?
$300,000.
How many?
About 300,000.
Yeah, now, how many units is that?
Plus or minus 37, 40, somewhere in that ballpark. They're about $7,500 a piece.
Wow, and so that's basically your whole staff?
Yeah. Because we bought them, the last time we did them over 2 years, we replaced them all in one chunk, so.
Okay. Any other major equipment needs that you foresee?
Well, we have a pumper next year in the capital plan, and
Right.
we moved the ladder truck out.
A year or two? Okay, good. And,
We try and get 20 years plus out of a pumper and 30 out of the ladder.
excellent. Not a lot of demand for the ladder
No,
in town, that's good.
no,
Right?
no, it's not
Until you need it.
it's not the frequency of use, it's when you need it, you need it.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your work, and budget work too.
I have nothing but thanks. Thank you for reading our budget message. Thank you for bringing forward a budget that we asked you to bring forward. And thank you for everything you guys do for the town.
I'll pass that along, means a lot to them.
Next up is the treasurer collector. And that starts, the expense detail starts on page 129.
Good morning. So, for my budget, there aren't a lot of changes. As always, health insurance, that went up 6% across the board this year, which is better than it could have been, I guess. I do have a slight increase to my salary line item this year because I'm hoping for an upgrade to my two administrative assistants in the office to executive assistants. And that's basically to kind of bring them in line to where that's falling across the town. I'm afraid that as other positions get increased in other departments, I might lose them. You have the responses to the questions there. There are a couple of things I wanted to note on number 8. I've never had a revolving fund before. There's new legislation that enables us to establish one for the purpose of using it for tax title collection, for fees, legal fees and such. What it is you would take the fees collected on current tax titles and put those into the revolving fund. There's no mechanism to actually establish a dollar amount off the bat. So starting fiscal 19, we'd take any fees collected on existing tax titles and put it into that fund and use it for legal fees and such. The other thing I did want to note is the last 2 weeks of December, due to that tax law change, we collected, just the last 2 weeks, $2.7 million, and that's compared to $112,000 the previous year in that same time period, so that was huge. And a lot of that was in-office traffic because people wanted those stamped receipts. So my staff really handled that well.
Big load.
I think that's pretty much the only things that I wanted to point out, so any questions?
Thank you, Amy.
Sure.
Questions, Larry?
None for me.
Julie?
I don't have any.
Don? No. Janelle?
Did you say both of the administrative assistants would become executive assistants?
Correct.
And would you have the need for an administrative assistant or just the two executives?
No.
Okay.
Current staff.
Just on that topic, Bob's been working on some of those elements. Those have not been presented to the board yet. This is just a placeholder that we have funding to be able to do it. But we will have that to the board probably in the next week or two.
The cost for next year to elevate those is $5,500, so it's not.
For both?
For both.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jack?
Mark?
No questions.
Lori?
None, thank you.
John?
I just have one, and Amy and I met earlier a couple of weeks ago. Let her know I was asking the question was, how much I asked it last year also, is that how much uncollected property taxes is due the town? That's the first question. And then, what are we doing to collect the uncollected taxes? And I did see a couple weeks ago in the Chronicle a couple liens placed against people.
Right, those are actually being officially liened on the 15th. That is for FY16. There are 18 properties currently going in. That amounts to about an additional $26,000 added to our current tax title account, including those liens, those new ones. We have about $2.4 million in just tax. The total overall, including interest, is close to $5.7 million. I did meet, Carol and Chris and I met with a new attorney last week. Her firm exclusively deals with tax takings, tax titles, and she will send out letters. A lot of the times when people get letters from an attorney, it's a little bit more effective. So we are planning on working with her, and she's going to get started on it right away. So
Chris?
that's
Just on that topic, we have taken that much more seriously in the last year or two. One of the things that we've done out of that $5.7 million, we have almost $369,000 that we knew that the Judah Eldridge property is one that we wanted to take off the books. So that is an initiative that we are working on, and certainly CPC voted it. The Board of Selectmen has been very supportive of it. We also have engaged Attorney Capola, has done some of the foreclosures, and we did meet yesterday, as Amy's alluded to, with another firm that has a little different approach, a little bit more working with people in terms of trying to make arrangements. And I would just say, I want to compliment Amy. I think when we posted the lists of people, the 300 and something that were on there, we had 30 to 50 people come in and arrange for payment plans. So, I'm kind of committed, and I think Amy's committed. We got to get our number down to a lower level, and I think we are starting to build that capacity. One other thing, though, and this has really been where property is owned, and I know this sounds like it should be simple, but it's not. We have owners unknown, and we have people that owe taxes on it, and we are trying to figure out who owns what. So we have also engaged the services of a title examiner to come in and start looking at this, so we can make sure that people are on the list are valid for us to go after and try to collect. But there is a fairly significant amount of uncertainty in terms of some of these property owners, and that's what we're also trying to work through. So it's not, and just for the kind of the record, you know, most towns, and I think we're in this area, we collect 98 to 99% of the taxes owed to us. So this has really just been an issue that accumulates over time, and we're trying to get that down. It certainly is too high of a level, and we recognize that, and we're trying to get it down.
Anything else, John?
Yeah, just to follow up on that, is it a high priority with the selectmen or the town administrator to get some of this $5.7 million?
I'll speak for us, and yes, it's a high priority.
Because in looking, like you said, Chris, at surrounding towns, theirs are considerably lower than us, in the $300,000-400,000 range. And we're the only, you know, Mount Everest in uncollected taxes at our surrounding towns. And that's a lot of money. You know, I pay my taxes like everyone in this room, and, you know.
I don't disagree at all. I just, my point is, when you have an issue that's built up over, you know, 15 or 20 years, and we've now started to make a more concerted effort to reduce it, we just need some time to get those numbers down.
Okay, thank you.
Dana?
Just to note, Chris, too, that
not
the,
Dana.
that property, the Judah Eldridge property is 10% of the,
It's almost
10% of the
10% by
total
itself.
amount owed. So there's quite a few of the owner unknown properties that add to that number.
Dana?
You have overtime budgeted in your department? Is that for a specific event, or is that just as you need it?
Yeah, it's as we need it. It's not a specific event. Most of the time when that comes into play is during sticker sales. If I have a sticker seller that's out and I need to use one of my staff to cover that, then
Okay.
chances are they're gonna go into overtime.
Do you see any opportunities to trim expenses anywhere? Or do you think that basically there's nothing out there to go after in your operational world?
No, it's pretty level funded. I think if we can establish that revolving fund, then that's good, because right now I have a foreclosure budget. I'm not even sure what it's down to right now. I think it usually is around 20,000, but that would take a lot off of the general fund to be able to use that revolving fund, so that'll be good.
Okay. You got a proposal coming?
Actually,
Yes.
on that, we just met with her
Thursday.
yesterday. We did incorporate that into the budget to create that revolving account. So that will be presented to the board Monday night as part of
Okay.
the final warrant.
Okay, good. Anything further from, want to tell us? Okay.
So just to
Mike?
thank you, I know that last 2 weeks of December was taxing on your department, but I received several phone calls thanking you guys for your professionalism and how well you handled it. So thank you.
I would note that was money being paid in advance.
Right,
It's an
and to
important thing to
that.
keep in
Yeah,
mind.
It's
Yeah.
not newfound money.
Not
It's just
newfound
money
money.
Right,
paid in
exactly.
advance.
And since
Thank
it
you.
is newfound money, it's money that we don't typically have this time of year. I do have $1 million of it in a 6-month CD. So that's, I think it's at 0.8%, so.
Okay, good, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me just give credit as well. I actually own a couple rental properties in Brewster and then in north of Boston, and we're the only ones I could pay online ahead of time.
Yeah.
Oh.
No one else and I'm not sure I need it or not, but I figure, a couple months I'd pay it early. And they didn't have that capability. They weren't up to speed. I got information a couple weeks into the year, so
That's good.
nice job.
So the last department for the early morning
Thank you.
would be the harbor?
Yep.
And then we can have a break?
I hope so.
That's, the harbor master's budget starts on 234, page 234, the expense side.
Morning, John.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here on a Saturday.
Thanks for having me. So John Rendon, Harbor Master, good morning. I'd like to just start kind of by just recognizing my department staff. I think everybody at the table knows we have a relatively small staff. We have 4 full-timers, and we have 3 positions that we hire on a seasonal basis. And they do a terrific work. The scope of work that our department has for the number of people that we employ, I think, is significant. And we maintain 24/7 readiness posture for any maritime assistance call, and that's year-round. And, we also do enforcement of our waterways, boating, and facility regs. We maintain our aids to navigation. We coordinate our dredging of our channels. We run a 200 slip marina. We take care of our harbor facility and maintenance, equipment maintenance requirements. We have over 600 moorings that we manage, and we have a very significant permitting process between dockage permits, mooring permits, thousands on wait lists, waterway user fees, offloading permits, and it's a significant amount that I think a relatively small staff accomplishes. And so for Michelle Morris and Tom Telesmatic and my deputy, Bill Neeser, I just publicly say thank you to them because they work their tail off. And then also we get great support. As you know, Heinz Proft, our natural resource director, works alongside us, and he's a big part of it as well. And then, of course, my seasonal staff. But we can't do all that without the support of other departments, and I clearly want to say the fire department we'll work hand in hand with. They are tremendous support. Same thing with police, DPW, town engineering, and from the budget and the administration side, I always get great support from Carol and her staff, and of course the town administrator. So what I've presented in front of you, I think you have my answers to your questions that you asked me to address in my budget. And so that's what I'd like to proceed with. So, the first section answers questions 1 through 5 that you asked. I'm just going to go through my budget to highlight some of this somewhat significant areas of discussion. I am asking for a part-time hire. A substitute custodian is the position. It's to help us maintain our public restrooms at the marina. We have hundreds and hundreds of people go through that marina, and we have been for many years cleaning those restrooms, public and boaters' restrooms, just with the staff that we have. We've got new facilities going in, and I'm asking for a position that we'd like to use capabilities 2 hours a day to get some support for some custodial services at the harbor. I know, I believe the golf department recently instituted or got the help of capabilities. I talked to Roman, he was very happy with what they can provide. So again, it's a relatively small amount, 2 hours a day for 20 weeks to help us maintain our public restrooms. The other increases with regards to salary, just regular union contract increases. Harbor master and deputy harbor master will receive a step increase this year. Our seasonal rates went up a little bit based upon the approved personal bylaw rate changes. So the hourly rate went up slightly for a couple of my part-time folks, and then the 2% increase per union contract. You see some increases with regards to longevity. Both Michelle and Tom have an increase in their longevity, and that's indicated there. And then the only other one with regards to salary is HEA contract, I believe, is going up $25 for their sick bonus. So that's reflected for our 3 employees in the HEA. The rest of the operational budget, just to highlight a few issues. Electricity, I proposed we increased our electrical cost by $2,400. That was reduced by about $1,000 from the town administrator. The increase really has to do with our new building will now be heated by mini-split units, electric mini-split units, vice the oil. So you'll see in my budget, I zeroed out the oil, and I just put an increase to the electricity, and that's the reason for that increase. It was reduced by 1,000. I think these mini-split units are supposed to be real efficient. Hopefully, we'll be okay there. On the rentals and leases, no other changes in gas utility, water utility. It was all level funded. There's a very slight increase. I'm asking for $1,000 to implement this new web-based operational reporting and communication system. Is it critical? No. Will it kind of streamline and help us do some of our reporting, our daily log keeping, our reports on our pump out usage and so forth? I think it's a neat web-based system that many of the local harbor master departments are going. It's $1,000 for an annual lease of that program. So if possible, we'd like to institute that. No other changes with regards to data processing, medical, advertising, et cetera. You see the oil heat is zeroed out. That's a 100% reduction because we're getting rid of our oil tank for our building. Under maintenance, building and equipment maintenance, we decreased it 50% from 15,000 to 7,500, and that line item deals with our dock repairs and some of the electrical and plumbing issues that we had with our old docks. We're going to have brand new docks, so hopefully we're not going to have many issues. So we reduced the budget in that category. If we go to bulk fuel, again, slight decrease, and that's just based upon usage. That's just based upon our usage from last year, so we reduced it from 9,000 to 7,000. And that has to do with vehicle fuel, patrol boat fuel, and our pump out operations. We have a slight increase being requested for repair and maintenance for our boats and trailers. And again, that's based upon FY17 and 18 actuals. You know, our boats some of our boats are getting a little older and just requires a little more maintenance, so a very slight increase from 5,000 to 7,000 for money to maintain our boats. Under dues and subscriptions, significant increase there, and that really only has to do with the Reserve Police Academy. Last year, our deputy got a quota for the Reserve Police Academy, which is a requirement by the Training Council requirement for harbor masters, so that's not needed any longer, so that was a reduction. And dredging is always one of those, you know, we have tried, as I think this board knows, we used to fund our dredging operations through town meeting articles, and we really have made an effort over the last several years to put it into our operating budget. You know, our target is 100,000. Every year we dredge, and like this coming year, we have 2 dredge projects, Saquatucket Channel, Allen Harbor Channel. Both are estimated about 8,000 cubic yards in each channel, so that right there is 72,000 each. So we're talking $150,000 in dredge operations or so. So, and not every year it's like that. We kind of did an analysis, and 100,000 is our target, and Chris has worked real hard to try to get that into our operating budget. We're not there yet. I had requested 75, and it is reduced to 65. Can we manage it? We have to. You know, one of the things I try to do is strike a balance from nourishing our public beaches. That's priority 1. But if I have an opportunity to sell sand to homeowners, and I have a long list of homeowners who call me saying, I need sand, you know, I try to do that so I can use that revenue to help us keep our channels dredged. So that's a work in progress. So those are the highlights of my budget. With regards to Questions 6, recap of revenues. I think you have a spreadsheet that I provided on our department revenues. It's a 3-year comparison. Again, you know, every year without any significant fee increases, we generate, you know, a little over $1 million in department revenues. And there's the breakdown there. If there's any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Price increases, yes, we have. As you know, we've raised just about all of our marina fees 10%. Went before the Board of Selectmen and got it approved. And so the breakdown really, that revenue increase, much of it will go towards paying the debt service on our marina project that we currently have going. We have a $6 million bond over a 20-year period, and much of the revenue that we're getting from the 11 additional slips that we're adding and the increases on our dockage permits, our mooring permits, waterway user fees, and offloading permits I list there, much of that will go towards helping to pay, and I think the estimate is 75% of the debt service on that $6 million bond. Question 8, with regards to revolving accounts, we do have 2 receipts reserve funds, 1621, 1626. 1621 is our mooring fees and 50% of our boat excise tax, which generates about $118,000 a year. And we have a balance currently of about $350,000 there. That is an important fund for me, from my perspective, to address emergent needs that come up and arise from harbor. I have the ability to request permission to fund with the town administrator, not having to go in front of a town meeting to use that money, and that's an important piece. We have used some of that money, as you may remember, to pay a change order of $75,000 for the tropical hardwood for our new marina. So that will be transferred over to that construction project. 1626 waterway user fees generate about $83,000 a year annually. We have a budget of about $144,000 in there now. That is required to get town meeting approval to utilize. That waterway user fee account is currently being used to pay the debt service on the town share of the Witchmere reconstruction project. We have a $478,000 debt that the town has on that. We're paying it off in over a 5-year period, and we're paying it from that account. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to ask.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
Larry?
Michael, I'm sorry, just 2 things quickly. One, just in terms of the dredging, John had asked for $100,000 to go from 65 to $100,000. I didn't think we could do that full amount, so it is 75. So we are trying to get to that target number. So we do have an increase in that. And then just in terms of the questions or the articles, Article 30 is to accept the grant. I know the Board of Selectmen is very familiar with that. We just talked about that at the last meeting, but just for FinCom to accept the grant for $1 million to complete the project, that would authorize the acceptance of the grant of $1 million and then to continue to utilize the full $3 million. So it would give us a new budgeted total of $4 million that we believe we need the lion's share of that to get the project finished. And that's what that article does, Article 30.
Just on that, Chris, you're preparing estimates that we'll have for town meeting?
Yes.
For the difference? Yes. Thank you. Larry?
I see a picture in the paper of a fancy new dredge the county's bought. Are they going to charge us more for that dredge, or is the cost going to be charge going to be the same?
I think they will be charging us. They're talking about, currently we just pay a per cubic yard rate, $9 without booster work and $13 for booster work. And so they're now talking about charging towns mobilization and demobilization costs. They haven't yet. I think contracts are coming in front of you on Monday night. There is none currently being charged, but that's the plan.
And that'll affect the charge you when you sell sand
and that, yes, sir. I mean, that's going to just increase our costs, and so we're going to have to look at that.
That's all I have.
Julie?
I just have a question off of this, is that we had to get rid of the boat storage down at the Downey property. So I think we all received an email, or may have just come to me, I'm not quite sure, but about that there are you were able to offer a boat storage ability that other facilities can't offer based on the depth of the hull.
Yes, there is a need that many of the boaters there in Saquatucket have communicated with regards to sailboat mast-up storage. So you own a sailboat, and there are very few places that are available to store their boats without having to step the mast. Stepping the mast is a cost that boat owners have to incur when they haul their boats out, because they certainly can't travel them over the roads. So if they want to keep their mast up, they got to be able to haul it and store it on site. And so there is a need in Harwich, because some of our commercial boat haulers don't have that room. They have other spaces to store boats, but it would require them taking them over the road. So in that particular instance that I did get copied on, that's what they're communicating.
Okay. So there's potential that if we were to revisit that for more fees to be collected.
There is a potential, yes. I mean, we would utilize our west lot, I would say, for that. East lot is a state lot, as you know, and we can't do that. But there is room to be able to haul it and store those mast-up sailboats on the west lot without having to go on the road, under wires, et cetera.
And without competing with other businesses. So I just wanted to make that point.
Sure.
Because I think it's a revenue we should consider. So, thank you, John. Thank you for all your hard work.
Done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I'm going to pick up with what Julie said in both that area and in another area. Just generically, if we get involved with anything, I'd like to see something in the order of a business plan. Like who might or might not be able to do it, what you'd expect in terms of expenses associated with it, and what you would propose as receipts for it. This next one is a smaller one, but it does concern me in general. When you get a computer program in general, it's got to do one of two things. It's got to either increase your productivity or enhance your service. So pretty much I'm looking for anybody who wants to implement something new, because I can guarantee it's not going to be less than $1,000 as it goes along. Because once you get locked into a specific program that's not a mainstream program, they tend to go up. I'd like to see that too as a business plan kind of thing, where, okay, what is it you're trying to accomplish with it? What's going to be deleted as a workload, or what's going to be enhanced in terms of service? As opposed to...
Sure, I mean, I certainly can do that. From my perspective, a small amount of money, I'm intrigued by the program. I frankly would like to see it being utilized for a year to see if it enhances our productivity, if it indeed is worth the use of it. It's brand new, it's out there, and it was just presented. If we don't want to fund it this year and we want to take a step back and see what other towns are using it, I'm okay with that. It's not critical. I just think we do a lot of incident reporting. We do investigative reporting when somebody has an accident. We do reporting on all of our pump-out boats to the grant folks, and this system is designed to be able to, make that reporting easier. So
I get that, but and I don't want to harp on it because it's not a big amount of money in the budget we're looking at. But just as a methodology, if I owned a business, I wouldn't be doing anything unless it was increasing receipts. But in terms of government, it would have to tie in to an enhanced level of service that you can describe, or a productivity increase that you could describe.
Okay. Janelle?
Thanks, John. I just have a couple questions. First is about the custodial services from capabilities. And I wanted to know why this is a departmental decision rather than a DPW, in that DPW is in charge of the custodians townwide, as we just were talking about earlier. And so it's really more between you two to get the answer, I guess.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know we've had discussions with DPW about deploying people into these, really low-intensity uses.
And they've had a real tough time trying to fill spots that have only 2 hours a day. So we have made a decision that, I know Roman in particular, when he was going through this before, DPW can't hire people effectively for such small amount of time. So I did ask, I mean, I kind of initiated this, I did this in another community, where if you can find these basically contract services, so we're really hiring almost a contract service to come in and provide these.
Okay.
And in this case, they have, I believe, a job coach that kind of goes with them to
Right.
make sure it works. So it is in my opinion, a more cost-effective way of doing it. And DPW, again, just because of the small amount of hours and the limited nature of it, they haven't been able to fill the need, but yet the need exists. So we've had the individual departments explore doing that.
Is there a reason, though, that DPW couldn't have the contract service with capabilities?
I think that in conversation with Sean, I think that he was just comfortable that where they are small one-offs, that the department could do it, so the department would have that control over what needed to be done at their individual facility.
Okay,
That was really the only rationale between having them continue to do it.
okay.
And it's worked, I think, pretty well. I mean, Roman's up later, but I think it's worked very well for the golf operation.
Okay. And then these other questions are, okay.
If I could just add one thing, DPW custodians do help us with our off-site restrooms at Allen Harbor and Witchmere. You know, we have 2 smaller restrooms, and they do help maintain those. So this would be strictly at the harbor where we have just such a volume. And this position would only augment, my staff would still be required to clean them. We clean them, you know, 5 times a day kind of thing. Every time one of the larger passenger boats come in, they're flooded, and then we have to go in there. So it's a demand.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the logistics of budgeting, really. But then, so the specific questions for you are with the chart that you gave us. I was just looking at the figures of like Saquatucket dockage versus visitor dockage and Witchmere and Allen Harbor. So Saquatucket dockage has gone down significantly since FY15, but yet visitor dockage has gone up 7,000 and Witchmere dockage has gone up another 7,000. So I just wanted to find out a little bit more about these numbers, what the definitions are also. What does dockage actually mean? Are these people who hold permits, you know, pay for them up front, or are there day use people?
Yes, the dockage number for Saquatucket, Witchmere, and Allen Harbor, those are all based upon the length of their boat. And there's a certain charge per foot length of the boat. So, you know, the dockage number varies because people come in with smaller boats or they come in with bigger boats, and it's all driven by a per foot charge.
Okay.
Some people have a permit and they don't have a boat, okay? And so they get charged for, if it's a 40-foot slip, they get charged the 40-foot minimum.
Okay.
And they pay their dockage, but they may not have a boat this year. And so we utilize that slip year-round for visitor dockage. You know, people go out for 2 weeks and go to Nantucket. When they're gone, we backfill their slip with visitor dockage. We do have 9, it'll increase now, but we have 9 designated transient slips that we maintain for visitors. And that's the big nut where we get visitor dockage. But we backfill. Anytime one of our permit holders is gone, we backfill and try to fill those with visitor dockage. And so that is a big revenue source for us, is visitor dockage. But it's all driven on length of boat, so it varies.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it.
Jack?
Lori?
2 quick questions. You mentioned that your boats are getting older. What is the lifespan of the boat? I know we just heard about for ambulances.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we have, our pond boat is an old fire boat that's built in the 60s. So, you know, we just maintain it. It's a fiberglass hull, and as long as you maintain it, I mean, you know, our new boat, our eastern boat that we got when I first arrived 5 years ago, I mean, I think we're gonna have that for, you know, 20, 30 years. I mean, as long as you maintain them and you don't have an accident. But, you know, it takes some money. It takes just regular maintenance on them.
So,
Just where you mentioned old, I was ready to see where that would fall.
yeah, yeah.
And my other question has to do with dredging. We're doing the big dredging at Saquatucket now, and what about maintenance dredging? Do you have that planned in the future for frequency?
We do maintenance dredging of our harbor channels, the entrance channels, on a regular basis. So, you know, this year we'll be doing Saquatucket Channel and Allen Harbor Channel. Allen Harbor is every year.
Okay.
We just have somewhat of a porous jetty, and it requires us to dredge every year. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, it's costly, but if we do it right, you know, it serves dual purpose because we get to nourish our public beaches, and that's why we have such nice beaches, because it's all quality sand within the channels. We are dredging Saquatucket Channel, Saquatucket Harbor as part of this dock reconstruction project. You know, that harbor hasn't been dredged since the harbor was dug out and created. And so, you know, that's a bigger project because that material is not beach nourishment material. We have to load that on a barge and send it out to an offshore disposal site. In this particular case, we're sending it out to Rhode Island to dump it in a dump site. So it requires a significant amount of permits, cost. It's $85 a cubic yard to dispose of that, vice $9 a cubic yard for the county doing our channels. So it's a whole different ballgame.
Mark?
No questions.
John?
No, not really any questions. Some have been asked already. Just a quick question. This part-time position that you're requesting, John, is there any benefits associated with that position?
No.
No. Thank you.
Sure.
Good. Dana?
Thank you.
I've got a few questions. Lori asked you about the item 6, repair maintenance for boats and trailers. My understanding that, based on your answers, these are long-term, lasting, if properly maintained boats. But nonetheless, we should have some kind of a documented plan about replacement so that we can see when that's going to happen. So maybe it's a file item, but, you know, in 5 years or 10 years, it might be time. Be nice to know that as we go through it.
Yeah.
On question 8, you have the 2 reserve funds, and on the next page, you have the department revenue. Okay? So are these reserve funds, where do they get funded from, and is that revenue where they get funded from reflect the fact that there's money coming in and going out?
They are reflected there. So 1626, as it states, is funded through waterway user fees, and you see in the Department of Revenue spreadsheet, it has a line item that says waterway user fees.
Okay.
And then 1621 is funded from all of our mooring fees, and moorings includes our mooring permit fees and our mooring wait lists, and then we get half of the boat excise tax that comes in, and we work through the tax collector.
So you've got a good funding situation on those.
We do, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The $6 million bonding that was mentioned, what kind of rate do we get on that?
We've actually only done temporary borrowing on that. So far, we have not permanently borrowed it.
Okay.
The temporary borrowing was
It's right around 2%.
right around 2%, she thinks.
2%? Okay. We have a bunch of small bonding stuff, it seems like.
Well, I think the most recent bonding we did, which was short-term, obviously you don't want a long-term until you know what your actual costs are. I think it was over $10 million that we've been, we put together a lot of these small ones to do this a little bit longer.
Okay.
But probably next year when we have, we will be going out for long-term debt in the next year.
Okay. I assume that occasionally there's some kind of minor spill in the harbors of a little bit of fuel oil or gasoline or whatever. What does a typical spill cost to deal with, and who pays for it?
Well, if it's more than just a minor spill, then the Coast Guard gets involved, and they're ultimately responsible, and if it's a significant then they federalize it, and it's funded through the federal government. We had that case when we had a boat that went up on the jetties at night, kind of turned too early and was heading out fishing and went up on the rocks. That was federalized because there was a significant spill. You compare that to just this past fall, we had a little bit of oil at Allen Harbor that was leaking from a boat. We responded with oil pads and socks and booms and that kind of thing, and you know, we are equipped for that, and we pay that. I mean, we pay for the supplies. Allen Harbor Marine responded as well, so I mean, they utilized, you know, some of their equipment and some of their manpower, but we assisted that.
Do we recover the costs that we have
We do not.
from the insurance company or the individuals who were part of it?
No, sir. It's just like when we go out and tow a boat from a public safety perspective or assist somebody, we are not allowed to go out and collect payment for that. It's just part of our public service.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Yes, sir.
John, thank you for the presentation, and more important, thank you. You're far beyond a harbor master. You've done an outstanding job with grants and getting us reimbursements, and as well as the planning you've done on these projects. So I've been critical obviously over project costs, but no reflection on you. You've done an outstanding job bringing money in, and you're far more than a harbor master.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Does the boards want to take a break, quick? We are about 35 minutes behind schedule, so if we can be very quick, way we don't leave anyone here on a Saturday longer than they need to